My Star Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326 Orbital Bombardment Failure. Just when Monica had begun to imagine the corruptor capital planet melted into crystals by nuclear weapons, an accident suddenly occurred. The tentacles on the huge transparent shell of the corruptor capital planet suddenly began to wriggle, and yellow crystals were thrown at high speed towards the falling nuclear warheads. Because it was an orbital bombardment, in order to save costs, these nuclear warheads did not have propulsion devices, but fell by their own weight. This way of falling made these nuclear warheads an excellent target. Although the falling speed was extremely fast, it was not fast in the eyes of the corruptor controllers on the ground. Controlling the countless tentacles on the shell to divide the crystals that form the shield into small particles and throw them out as kinetic artillery shells was the last means for the corruptor capital planet to prevent invasion. This method is now used by them to block the falling nuclear warheads, and it has a miraculous effect. The nuclear warheads that could not change their trajectory by themselves were blown up in the air by the fragments thrown from the shield outside the planet's atmosphere. If you magnify these crystals, you will find that when these crystals are made, two independent hollow structures are generated inside them, and each hollow contains a liquid. When the crystals are thrown at the nuclear warhead at high speed and shattered, the mixture of the two liquids instantly releases a large amount of energy, which instantly detonates the nuclear warhead without any protection. Damn it! Throw all the nuclear warheads at once. Monica frowned when she saw that the corruptors were able to intercept the nuclear warheads. Following her order, all the nuclear warheads no longer followed the set falling rules this time, but fell down in a swarm. The densely packed nuclear warheads covered the sky. If these nuclear warheads could successfully land, it would be absolutely fatal to the corruptor capital star under the Imperial fleet. The equivalent of these nuclear warheads can plow the entire capital star 10 times. Seeing so many nuclear warheads falling, the corruptors who controlled the tentacles of the outer shield of the corruptor capital star were sweating profusely and began to throw crystals into the sky frantically. However, despite the large number of tentacles and high throwing efficiency, many nuclear warheads still broke through the corruptors' interception network and reached the outer shield of the capital planet. A series of violent flashes lit up, and the nuclear warheads that escaped the net were detonated on the outer shield of the corruptor's capital planet. The high temperature instantly melted the outer shield of the corruptor's capital planet into gas, and the huge impact force was transmitted to the surrounding fish scale shields through these solid structures. The biological tissues between the fish scale shields began to absorb energy desperately, but the result was obvious. The power generated by so many nuclear bomb explosions was multiplied by the air. Soon the surrounding tissues could no longer absorb it, and they dissolved themselves into pools of liquid and fell to the ground. People on the ground who were looking up at the huge flash that suddenly appeared in the sky suddenly felt a lot of boiling liquid falling from the sky, soaking the curious people on the ground thoroughly. The corruptor government did not issue an alarm to the people, because according to the nature of the empire, no matter how deep you escape, you cannot survive under the devastating attack, so it is better to let these people die with curiosity. Of course, this is also related to the confidence of the corruptors. They believe that the shield outside the planet can withstand the orbital attack of the Empire. However, after this wave of attacks, although only a few nuclear warheads fell on the ground, creating several large pits with a diameter of tens of kilometers, the rest of the nuclear warheads fell on the shield on the surface of the planet. Because the force was too great, the outer shield of the entire planet began to disintegrate, and the shield composed of huge scaly transparent crystals lost connection and began to fall. Fortunately, when designing it, the engineers of the corruptors took this into consideration. The falling huge shield began to dissolve itself in the air, and when it reached the ground, only a pool of liquid was left. Sir, all our nuclear warheads have been launched, and we can continue orbital bombing. An officer shook his head. As soon as he finished speaking, a layer of pale yellow light suddenly appeared on the entire planet. What is this? Monica asked, puzzled. It's being calculated. The officer on the side hurried back. Sir, I've calculated that this is a kinetic energy canceling barrier. The energy of this barrier comes from deep in the Earth's core, possibly collected from the Earth's core. The officer looked at the data in front of him and reported to Monica. Damn, they are preventing us from using kinetic weapons to attack their ground. Monica's expression was a little tangled. They now felt helpless about this capital planet. It's true that this civilization that has existed for thousands of years can't have no hidden treasures. Sir, Your Majesty's communication, the communications officer interrupted Monica's contemplation. Come in. Monica straightened her clothes and stood in front of the communicator. Tianyi has reported your current situation to me. This is the coordinates of the office building, where their head of state is located on the Corruptor's capital planet. Project the 3000 SS level confidential hibernation chambers on the flagship over there, and don't worry about the rest, Mingze ordered Monica with a serious face. Yes, Monica saluted after looking at the coordinates sent by Mingze. Then Mingze disappeared, and Monica breathed a sigh of relief. But then her curiosity was aroused. She knew before boarding the ship that there were 3,000 large black landing chambers stored on this flagship. The confidentiality level of these landing chambers was SS level, which was not a level that a temporary commander like her could access. At the beginning, Mingze also reminded her that only His Majesty Mingze and Tianyi had the authority to use these landing chambers, and she would be notified when they were used, which made her very curious now. But soon she would know what was stored in these landing chambers. Unlock the landing chambers SS-01 to SS-3000, and the drop coordinates are 231, 314, 878. Unlock key, Monica shouted to the console. After receiving the unlock key, the shipboard computer instantly unlocked the use rights of the 3000 landing chambers. The battleship armor under the landing chamber position also began to slowly open to both sides, and the blue sky appeared under the launch track of the landing chamber. Start dropping, Monica pressed the confirmation button hard, and 3,000 huge airdrop capsules flew towards an octagonal building on the ground. After leaving the second squadron's flagship, these airdrop capsules actually ejected two pairs of wings, one large and one small, to the sides, and then blue light began to emerge from the tail of the landing chamber. Chapter 327 Shadow Force. But this is not the end. 3 laser close-in defense turrets began to rise on the surface of these landing capsules. A layer of blue shield also began to emerge on the landing capsule. With the sudden force of the thrusters at the rear of the landing capsule rushed towards the target point like a sharp arrow. Monica was stunned. She said that these landing capsules were so big. Each one was as big as half a space fighter and occupied 90% of the space in the flagship warehouse. It turned out that these landing capsules could be transformed into aircraft in the atmosphere. Judging from these functions, this was prepared to quickly break through the enemy's fire blockade and reach the target point. The shield can even protect the things or people in the landing capsule from harm. So what exactly are these landing capsules that are worth spending so much to protect? As the landing capsules broke into the sky of the Corruptor's capital planet, countless shells rose from the ground and shot at the landing capsules. These shells were fired by the Corruptor's ground forces. Their function is to prevent the landing capsules from getting close. However, these weapons lost their effect in front of these 3,000 special landing capsules. The 3 close-in defense guns on the landing chamber easily detonated the flying shell crystals. The remaining shells that did not have time to detonate were also dodged by the landing chamber through maneuvers, and the occasional ones that were missed were blocked by the landing chamber's shield. Tens of seconds later, 3,000 landing chambers broke through the Corruptor's anti-aircraft firepower network on the ground and reached the target point. During the whole process, no landing chamber was seriously damaged. The most serious injury was that the shield was shattered and a big hole was smashed in the shell. Flames suddenly emerged from the bottom of the landing chamber that reached the target point, stabilizing the landing chamber that was descending in the low air. Accompanied by a burst of exhaust sound, the shell of the landing chamber unfolded outward, and a group of black shadows dressed in black cloak-like warrior costumes jumped out of the landing chamber. The height of dozens of meters seemed to be no problem for these black figures. When they were dozens of centimeters away from the ground, gusts of whirlwinds floated on the ground, and the black figures slowly landed in the whirlwind. As 2 blue beam energy swords lit up, the black figures that landed on the ground rushed towards the stunned Corruptor soldiers around without stopping. A black shadow jumped high when it collided with a Corruptor soldier head-on, and swung the beam energy sword in its hand to cut off the head of the Corruptor soldier. Another black shadow ran through the Corruptor's crotch, and the beam energy sword in its hand cut the Corruptor soldier in half from under its body. The beam energy swords in the hands of these black shadows easily cut off the sabers in the hands of the Corruptors, and then these beam energy swords would pass through the chests of the Corruptor soldiers. When encountering a target that is out of reach but threatens his companions, the black figure flipped his hand and the sneak-attacking Corruptor soldiers would be blown away. Some Corruptor elite officers roared and enlarged their bodies, drew out their lightsabers and rushed towards the black shadows. Just when Monica, who was watching the battle in orbit, thought that these black shadows were in danger, she saw Black Shadow suddenly put away the beam sword and aimed his two arms at the charging Corruptor elite. A visible shock wave instantly shot out from the middle of the Black Shadow's arms, smashing the charging Corruptor elite into a pool of powder. That's right, these Black Shadows were the problematic Sith warriors' shadow troops that had undergone mechanized transformation by the Empire. Their two arms were equipped with sonic cannon launchers. With their Sith power, they could bind and aim the shells of the sonic cannons, and easily smash the deformed Corruptor from the inside within 15 meters. After dozens of seconds, the entire huge building square was left with only the standing shadow troop soldiers and corpses all over the ground. The black mass of corpses was extremely shocking from the orbit. Monica estimated that there were at least tens of thousands of corpses on the ground. Among them were senior officers of the Corruptor. This is too powerful. Why didn't I know that the Empire still had such a powerful ground force? Monica muttered to herself. Only you can see this battle. I have blocked the observation equipment for everyone else. Your Majesty wants to train you, so he lets you know the existence of this secret army of the Empire. Tianyi appeared in the bridge. Monica looked up and found that she was surrounded by a silver light curtain. In this light curtain, neither sound nor image can be transmitted. Tianyi saw through Monica's doubts. Is this coordinate point the location of the head of the Corruptor civilization? Monica put aside her doubts and asked questions about the mission. She knew that there were some things she shouldn't ask about, such as the origin of this army. That's right, we have to disrupt the command level of the Corruptor civilization by decapitation, so that their 6 families, who are not harmonious, will fall into the vortex of power struggle. Tianyi nodded. While Tianyi and Monica were talking, the shadow troops on the ground had put away their weapons and gathered together to walk towards an octagonal building in the south of the square. Because when it was built, no one thought that someone could break through to their political center under the siege of tens of thousands of guards. Therefore, the entire government building did not have any additional defensive weapons. After all, being able to enter here also meant that the Corruptor civilization was going to perish. As the door of the government building opened, a huge passage several kilometers long was revealed. We will form groups of 10, divided into 300 groups, and disperse to find the target. All life forms we see will be eliminated. The commander of the Shadow Force lifted his cloak to reveal his half-mechanical, half-human face, and ordered expressionlessly. Yes, sir. Many warriors nodded and dispersed to form 300 groups and dispersed into the building. Soon, the whole building was filled with explosions and gunshots. It was obvious that the dispersed teams had already exchanged fire with the staff and guards hiding in the building. However, as time went on, the gunshots became less and less, leaving only the screams from the Corruptors. The commander of the Shadow Force was not idle either, but led 9 warriors straight to the stairs at the end of the passage. As they walked up the towering stairs, they came to a black door. The commander used the power of Sith to shatter the gate, and the guards hiding behind the gate were blown away by the flying gate. After seeing that the danger was resolved, the commander clapped his hands and slowly walked into the new corridor. This corridor was obviously more than 1 level higher than the corridor outside. The golden noble patterns were everywhere, indicating that the people working here were definitely high-level people in the Corruptor civilization. Chapter 328 Utilization. The men slowly walked to a closed door, and the commander waved his hand. 2 shadow warriors came forward from behind him, and a burst of electric current sounded, and 2 beam energy swords popped out from the hilts in the hands of the 2 warriors. As the 2 warriors thrust the beam energy swords into the closed door, 2 piercing screams came from behind the door. If you look at this world from the mechanical eyes of these shadow warriors, you will find that the originally thick door is like nothing in front of them. The 2 Corruptors behind the door exuded dazzling yellow, which is so conspicuous in the slightly darker environment around them. This function of seeing through is to combine the sound wave, infrared, and energy wave scanning devices together, and project them into their sight after being calculated by the intelligent brain in the warriors' brains. It allows the shadow warriors to easily find enemies hiding behind obstacles or bunkers. In the room at the end of the corridor, the commander-in-chief of the Corruptors stood in the office of the head of state and paced back and forth. As the sound of breaking the door not far away got closer and closer, the commander-in-chief was so anxious that sweat broke out on his forehead. "Master, we have no chance. The orbit is full of warships of the Sith Empire. Our evacuation ships can't fly out. If we don't go to the underground bunker, we will be captured alive." "How can you be so calm?" The commander looked out through the peephole of the door from time to time anxiously. The leader of the corruption did not speak, but sat quietly in front of his desk, with his elbows on the table and his hands clasped together. With a bang, the door of the room next to the head of the office was blown away by the shadow warrior, but the owner of this office was hiding in the head of the office. "No one is here, let's go to the last room." The voice of the imperial warrior came from outside the door. The commander-in-chief of the corruption was anxious, and walked quickly to the head of the desk and supported his hands on the table. "Master, let's evacuate. Because of your order not to allow evacuation, our senior leaders have been lost." The commander-in-chief was a little angry. Those who only obey me on the surface and secretly want to seize my power, it is my intention to clean them up. It's just right to use the Sith Empire to clean up the management of our country. The head of state finally raised his head, and a trace of black lines occasionally wandered in his two pairs of white eyes. "You?" The commander-in-chief was shocked. He didn't expect that the reason why their head of state didn't let them hide in the underground bunker was to clean up their senior management to achieve the purpose of recentralization. "It's time for you to die with them. The era of the 6 major families is over." The head of the corrupt suddenly stretched out his arms and grabbed the commander-in-chief's neck in his hands. As the tentacles in the head of state's hands drilled into the commander-in-chief's body, the commander-in-chief's body shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. "The cancer has been cleaned up, and the Sith Empire has no use. It's time to kill the Sith Empire's fleet." The head of the corrupt looked up in the direction of the Imperial fleet. At this moment, the door of the room was suddenly opened, and 10 shadow warriors walked in holding energy swords. "Surrender. You have no way to escape, corruptor leader." The commander of the shadow force stood in front of the corruptor leader, who was looking up at the starry sky with an expressionless face. "The real battle has just begun. Why are you in such a hurry?" The corruptor leader did not even turn his head, and continued to look up at the starry sky and muttered to himself. Before he finished speaking, hundreds of tiny black threads extended from the corruptor leader's robe to the floor. After the threads froze for half a second, they suddenly shot towards the shadow warriors around. The shadow warriors immediately realized that something was wrong with their extraordinary reaction speed, and wanted to cut off these black threads with the lightsabers in their hands. But to their surprise, these threads drilled into the ground halfway through. "Not good. Be careful." Before the commander of the shadow force finished speaking, hundreds of threads under the ground had already penetrated the bodies of all the shadow warriors in the entire office. As these thin lines began to wriggle, the bodies of the shadow warriors shrank quickly, and soon only metal parts and artificial organs were left on the ground. "High-level humans taste good." The corruptor leader licked his lips and walked towards his desk. The corruptor leader walked to his desk and stretched out his hands to the air. Tentacles extended from the ceiling of the office and merged with the corruptor leader's hands. Then the floor of the office began to crack, and huge tentacles stretched out from the ground, tightly wrapping the body of the corruptor leader. After a few seconds, the corruptor leader was wrapped into a huge egg-shaped object and taken back underground. "Sir, a high-energy reaction has been discovered on the corruptor capital planet, and the energy level of the energy anomaly is rapidly increasing." An officer came to the barrier surrounding Monica in a panic and interrupted the conversation between Monica and Tianyi. "What's going on?" Projected on the central screen, after Tianyi eliminated the barrier, Monica sat back in her chair. "Yes, sir." The officer uploaded the image from the sensor to the central screen of the flagship bridge. A huge volcano appeared on the screen, and the area of this volcano was tens of kilometers. "Isn't this just a volcano? It's normal for it to have high-energy reactions if it erupts," Monica asked, puzzled. "No, sir, please look carefully." The officer enlarged the screen little by little. A huge red light group that was out of tune with the surrounding brightness appeared under the original volcano, and the size of this light group was still expanding. Judging from the shape of the enlarged light group, this is a giant man-made object with sharp edges and corners. "What is this?" Looking at such a huge high-energy object, everyone in the bridge was puzzled. But soon they knew what this man-made object hidden under the volcano was. The object began to rush quickly to the upper layer of the volcano, and soon jumped out of the volcano. "Switch back to the normal view," Monica shouted hurriedly. As the energy distribution view on the screen changed to the normal view, this mysterious man-made object revealed its true face. A huge black warship was flying up from the huge magma pool between the volcanoes. Magma was still dripping down from the spaceship. Calculate the general data of the spaceship. We need to estimate its combat capability. Monica shouted to the officer beside her. Yes. Turn on the scanning equipment. The officer's hand quickly controlled the screen. Chapter 329, The Corruptor's Secret. This ship is 18,000 meters long, 4,000 meters wide at its widest point, and 3,000 meters high at its highest point. It's 4 times the size of our Michigan dreadnought. The officer who was in charge of scanning the Corruptor battleship looked a little ugly. The data of this battleship was too strong. You know, although the Corruptors win by numbers, their close combat effectiveness at the same size is no less than that of ordinary Empire battleships of the same tonnage. The Empire just took advantage of the distance advantage in the previous battle to gain the upper hand, and now with the upgrade of the Corruptor battleship, the range advantage of the Empire fleet has gradually been offset. Such a large battleship, if nothing unexpected happens, must be almost the same as the Empire's dreadnought. After all, it is more than 4 times the size. A larger size means a stronger reactor, more shields, more main and secondary guns, and a possible super weapon. What's going on? Haven't the Corruptor's fleets always appeared with warships below the battleship level? We haven't even encountered their battleships, so how come a dreadnought-level warship suddenly appeared? Li Mingze's figure appeared in the bridge. After receiving the message, he hurriedly switched to the advent stand-in in the flagship. I think this may be the trump card that the Corruptor civilization has hidden for thousands of years. Monica looked at the screen in a daze. The huge warship on the screen has completely left the magma pool, and dozens of huge tentacles began to extend from the warship and wave in the air. What is this? I'll go ask Liz. After Li Mingze finished speaking, he connected to Liz's communication, who is attacking the last line of defense of the Empire. Your Majesty, the Emperor of Sith, what do you want to talk to me about? Liz's voice came from the intercom. Does your civilization have a dreadnought as the last trump card? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Li Mingze's tone was a little angry. Your Majesty, I don't know about this either. I only know that there is such a legend in our civilization. Liz felt a little wronged. Oh? What legend is that? Tell me about it, Li Mingze said coldly. It is said that before I was born, about 2,000 years ago, an extremely large space creature broke into the star field of our civilization. At that time, our civilization had already matured the gene extraction and optimization technology, and seeing such a giant space creature was like finding a treasure. Our current head of state led all the warships of the civilization at that time to use the wheel tactics, and only after sacrificing half of the warships did he seriously injure the creature. In order to obtain the powerful power of this creature, our head of state chose to merge with the already seriously injured space creature. After destroying the consciousness of this space creature, the head of state successfully took this extremely powerful body for himself, but the price was that his human body also disappeared. Until later, he didn't know how to reshape his body and return to civilization, but at that time the 6 major families had already controlled the operation of the entire civilization. Until now, we don't know if this story is true or not. It has been circulating for too long. Liz told this story he heard when he was a child in one breath. This story is true. Your leader did merge with a monster. After being seriously injured, the space creature must have been hiding in the magma to recover, and it has not seen the light of day until now. Li Mingze's throat was a little dry. What should we do then? We can't give up. Liz hesitated. If it was really as the legend said, the Empire would not be able to defeat the space creature that had been seriously injured by half of the civilization's fleet. His dream of becoming the leader would become unattainable, and he might be exposed at any time. What would happen to him then? No. We will destroy this biological warship. When you receive our signal, you will return immediately and fight for the position of leader. Li Mingze shook his head and gave him a positive answer. Okay, I will withdraw with my fleet when I receive the signal. Liz nodded. By the way, is the map I gave you okay? Did you encounter the enemy? Liz remembered something and asked carefully. We did, and our fleet suffered extremely heavy losses. Li Mingze made up a story with a hint of coldness in his eyes. It's all my fault. I should have confirmed it before sending it to you. These damn commanders changed their routes without authorization. It's all my fault. I will compensate you when I ascend to the position of the head of state. Liss's face was full of an expression of I'm wrong, pretending to be innocent. I remember. Don't forget to compensate us when you ascend to the throne, Li Mingze said and hung up the communication. That's right, this battleship is a giant space creature fused by the head of the corruptor. Li Mingze turned his head inside to Monica and others. The universe is so incredible that such a magical creature can be born, Monica sighed. Since it is a creature, it has weaknesses. If it has weaknesses, we have a chance. All warships fire at the same time. The 2 dreadnoughts will be here soon. Li Mingze raised his voice to encourage everyone. The warships of the 2nd Squadron followed the order and aimed their guns at the corruptor dreadnought that was slowly leaving the atmosphere. Wait until he leaves the kinetic defense barrier. Li Mingze stared at the big screen in front of him. Now, fire, Li Mingze shouted loudly after seeing that the corrupted dreadnought on the screen had left the yellow light film. Shells and missiles accompanied by beams from beam cannons fiercely hit the dreadnought that had just emerged. Soon, ripples began to appear on the surface shield of the dreadnought, and bursts of flashes of explosions began to flash on its shield. No, Your Majesty, according to my calculations, its shield has reached the level of our crescent. Our firepower can't knock through its shield in a short time. Tianyi opened his eyes and said frustratedly. Mobile attack, its flight speed is very slow. We use the tactics of flying a kite, Li Mingze ordered while looking at the corrupted dreadnought that was still flying slowly. Yes, the warships began to circle around the corrupted dreadnought under the leadership of the flagship. The bulky corrupted dreadnought was indeed not very mobile. It began to slowly rotate its hull, hoping to aim its main gun at the high-speed moving Imperial fleet. However, reality was destined to disappoint it, as its turning speed was far slower than the speed at which the Imperial fleet circled. Chapter 330 When it rains, it rains. Through the holographic screen on the left side of the bridge, Li Mingze and others could clearly see the mouth of this dreadnought opening and closing continuously, and the tongue in its mouth was replaced by densely packed gun barrels. This space creature seems to have been transformed very thoroughly, with weapons everywhere on its body. Monica sighed as she looked at the gun barrels in the mouth of this biological version of the dreadnought. Just when everyone thought that they could keep kiting until the dreadnought died, the corruptor dreadnought suddenly stopped. As the hull of the dreadnought shook, a thick layer of armor fell off its surface. The originally bulky dreadnought suddenly became extremely light, and with a slight turn, it aimed its big mouth at the front of the Imperial fleet. All warships, disperse, Monica, who had just discovered something was wrong, shouted. But it was too late, and clumps of red liquid flew out of the gun barrels in the mouth of this biological dreadnought. These liquids fell on the hull of the circling Imperial warship like heavy rain. Although emergency maneuvers had been carried out, half of the warships were still hit by the red rain of bullets. The red liquid ball shattered after hitting the shield of the Imperial warship, and the shattered red liquid immediately wrapped the shield of the warship. Your Majesty, the shield of our warship is falling rapidly, and these red liquids can continue to corrode the shield. Tianyi frowned and whispered in Li Mingze's ear. You mean, this weapon is specifically aimed at the shield? I'm not sure. We can only draw a conclusion when it corrodes the armor of our warship. Tianyi shook his head. As soon as Tianyi finished speaking, the shield of a destroyer had been corroded, and the red liquid ball that hit it directly hit the armor of the destroyer. As the ground wrapped in the red liquid ball shattered, the red liquid adhered to the armor of the destroyer, making a hissing sound of dissolving. The composition of this red liquid has been analyzed. It is a special metal that has been heated to thousands of degrees. This metal has a very strong ability to absorb heat, and the stored heat can be released continuously for dozens of minutes, so it can cause continuous damage to the shield. As for the armor, it can only continuously release heat to the armor, so that the metal of the armor reaches the melting point, thereby weakening the protective power of the battleship armor, and then it can be easily broken. Tianyi hurriedly reported the analysis data to Li Mingze so that he could make the right decision. All warships immediately dodged to the outside. Li Mingze grabbed the intercom beside him and shouted loudly, hoping that it was still in time to dodge now. The warships that received the order turned around and flew to the outside. At this time, their shields had basically been melted through, and a lot of red liquid had stained the armor of the warships. Now the armor of these attacked warships has become very soft. The corruptor dreadnought, which waited for the right time, did not give these Imperial warships a chance to escape. Countless golden crystals sprayed out from the heads of its dozens of tentacles and flew towards the evacuating Imperial warships. These golden crystals are the same as the yellow crystals on the outer shield of the Corruptor capital star, but they are more powerful. A few seconds later, these crystals had already hit the melted and softened armor of the Imperial warships. As the flashes of explosions lit up, the armor of the warships was easily shattered by the explosions, and the entire warship was blown into dozens of pieces soon after. Damn, it seems that the defense measures on the capital star were also extracted from the genes of this monster, but why didn't they apply them to ordinary Corruptor warships? Mingze looked at the destroyed warships and had a headache. At this time, a large number of flashes suddenly appeared on the periphery of the Corruptor capital star system, and two huge fleets jumped out of hyperspace into this universe. It's the two encirclement and suppression fleets. They came so quickly. Mingze frowned deeply. The two encirclement and suppression fleets came at the right time. Originally, his fleet was already at a disadvantage, and he didn't expect to add two more hostile fleets. When will our dreadnoughts arrive? Mingze turned around and asked Tianyi. There are still 2 hours, Your Majesty. Tianyi estimated that because the warships were in hyperspace and had lost communication. Mingze nodded and turned to continue commanding the battle. All warships retreat, we circle around this star system and don't let them catch up. Mingze felt that it would be more reliable to wait until the two dreadnoughts arrived before starting the battle, otherwise it would be meaningless if his fleet was wiped out here. Received. As the ships sent back information, the warships of the Imperial fleet turned around and accelerated to fly towards the distant starry sky. The Corruptor dreadnought, which was ready to win the battle again, saw that the Imperial fleet was about to run away and immediately turned around to catch up. The two encirclement fleets that had just jumped out of hyperspace also received the message from the dreadnoughts and accelerated to chase in the direction of the Imperial fleet's escape. 2 hours later, the two Imperial dreadnoughts that Mingze had been waiting for finally appeared in the starry sky. Tianyi, calculate how we can break the shield of this biological Corruptor dreadnought. Mingze saw the arrival of the Michigan equipped with a gravity cannon, and his confidence increased immediately. This super weapon is not afraid of your size, but is afraid of your small size. Such a huge and heavy Corruptor dreadnought is very suitable for the taste of gravity cannon. Calculating, we need 2 dreadnoughts and all the weapons of the Imperial fleet to attack for a day to break the shield of this dreadnought. If the main gun shells of the Crescent are still available, the time can be shortened to half a day. Tianyi blinked and came to a conclusion. Too slow. Is there a faster solution? Mingze said dissatisfiedly. Calculating, yes, if we let all the destroyers hit the shield of this dreadnought together and start the reactor to self-destruct at the same time, and then cooperate with the fleet's salvo, it is estimated that 1 round can take down the shield of this dreadnought. Tianyi's eyes flickered and looked at Mingze. All the modified destroyers stay, and the rest of the destroyers clear all the personnel in the warships, set the automatic driving and hit the Corruptor's dreadnought. Mingze did not hesitate. For the Empire, the destroyers that took only 4 months to build were consumable. Compared to battleships, which took 16 months to build, and cruisers, which took 8 months to build, destroyers are cannon fodder warships that can be easily produced. As warship technology is upgraded, the construction time is extended. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331 Fall. Quick, everyone abandon ship immediately. Shouts came from the bridge of the Imperial Expeditionary Fleet. The soldiers in the warships quickly ran to the nearest escape pods and were ejected into space amid the sound of gas jets. Let these escape pods float in space first, and we will rescue them after the battle is over. Mingze calmly glanced at the escape pods that were gradually drifting away in space. Okay, Tianyi controlled these warships to start ramming. After all the members on the last destroyer were evacuated, Mingze adjusted his sitting position and ordered Tianyi. With Mingze's order, tens of thousands of destroyers suddenly turned around and rammed towards the Corruptor biological dreadnought. The thrusters at the rear of these destroyers were running frantically, completely ignoring the loss and only seeking to achieve the fastest speed. Tens of thousands of Imperial destroyers turned into tens of thousands of meteors and slammed hard into the shield of the Corruptor's dreadnought. If the impact alone was not enough to shake the shield of the bio-dreadnought, the result would be completely different after the destroyers detonated their reactors at the moment of impact. By overloading the reactor overheated and exploded, generating unparalleled destructive power, and small suns began to rise on the shield of the Corruptor dreadnought. The power of the ship's high-power reactor after the stability was destroyed was comparable to that of dozens of nuclear warheads, and the fragments of the spacecraft caused secondary damage to the Corruptor dreadnought again. When 2/3 of the Imperial destroyers hit the bio-dreadnought, its shield could no longer hold on and shattered and dissipated in space. Since the intended purpose had been achieved, there was no need for the remaining destroyers to make unnecessary sacrifices. The remaining destroyers quickly fired and reversed, using the force of the artillery fire to help themselves break. After another 50 destroyers failed to break and hit the armor of the bio-dreadnought, the remaining Imperial destroyers slowly stopped and began to retreat. At this time, the damage caused by the self-explosion of the 50 Imperial destroyers that crashed into the bio-dreadnought after the shield was broken tore a huge gap of more than 1,000 meters in length in the armor of the bio-dreadnought, and the light red blood drifted into the starry sky from the gap. However, as the muscles in the bio-dreadnought moved, the bleeding wound was quickly blocked, but the damaged armor on the outside could not grow back in a short time. Now, Michigan's gravity cannon fire, Li Mingze ordered immediately after seeing a gap in the bio-dreadnought. As the bow of the Michigan deformed, a red ball of light flew out quickly and hit the wound of the Corruptor bio-dreadnought. Because the Empire had long known that this kind of gravity weapon had little effect on the warships of the previous generation of civilization, it had advanced the Michigan to place extremely close to the bio-dreadnought early. The short distance made the gravity cannon hit the wound of the Corruptor bio-dreadnought almost as soon as it was fired. After the gravity bomb came into contact with a dreadnought of such a huge weight, its power increased immediately, and the huge gravity pulled the body of the dreadnought back to its wound. The body composed of biological tissues obviously could not resist such a huge gravity, and the original anti-gravity organs were also helpless against the gravity anomaly that occurred on its body. No, the biological Corruptor sent out unwilling signals in all directions, and at the same time, the tentacles around it began to dance wildly, whipping the shield of the Imperial Michigan and causing ripples. The red solution group ejected from its mouth had just left the transmitter when it was sucked back by the huge gravity. The Corruptor leader began to feel that his consciousness was disappearing little by little. After a few minutes, the artificial equipment on the biological dreadnought suddenly detached from the dreadnought. The monster's huge eyeballs also turned from red to black, and the whole body began to wriggle. The encirclement fleet on both sides of the Corruptor dreadnought suddenly found that the connection between them and the dreadnought had disappeared, and the data flow between various devices to exchange data was also cut off. What's going on? Has the fire already? The two Corruptor commanders looked at each other in the video. Just when everyone thought that the battle was about to end, something strange happened. The biological dreadnought, which was about to shrink into a ball, suddenly had hundreds of huge spikes protruding from its body after its eyes turned black, and its collapsed body began to gradually recover. After seeing the huge spikes of the biological dreadnought, the pupils of one of the two commanders of the encirclement and suppression fleet suddenly shrank. This commander is older than the other commanders, and accordingly, he knows more things. When the Führer led the fleet to fight this space creature, he was still a small logistics soldier. What impressed him most was the huge black eyes and spikes on the body of this creature. Now the appearance of this dreadnought overlaps with that creature at the beginning. Not good, the instinctive consciousness of this space creature has awakened, and I'm afraid that the Führer who suppressed it has died. The commander grabbed the intercom and shouted loudly. But he found out too late. The biological dreadnought quickly recovered its original size under the eyes of the two parties, as if the gravity bomb had not exploded. Could it be that it absorbed our adaptive genes? The Corruptor commander suddenly broke out in sweat. In order to colonize more planets, the Corruptors added a rare adaptive gene to their genes. The function of this gene is that if it is in an extreme environment that does not immediately cause the individual to die, the individual will be able to immediately evolve to adapt to the environment if it has enough energy. The scope of application of this adaptive gene is high temperature, low oxygen, high oxygen, toxic gas, high gravity environment, etc. The Empire's gravity cannon just meets the condition of high gravity environment. When this gravity cannon did not kill the biological dreadnought, it had already begun to evolve itself to adapt to this high gravity environment. Let's retreat, the Corruptor commander ordered anxiously. But it was too late. The biological dreadnought in the middle of the two fleets instantly stabbed hundreds of giant thorns on its body in all directions, and the corruptor warships that were unable to react were pierced by the giant thorns one after another. The only man-made equipment left was floating in space. It's gone berserk. We're finished. The commander of the corruptor was somewhat desperate. He knew that when the foe fought this space creature, he was not as brave as the legend said. This space creature had already suffered a lot of injuries before it broke into their star field. Chapter 332 Victory and Retreat. The reason why they were able to severely injure this space creature with only the loss of ordinary warships was that it was originally injured. After their leader merged it, although he added a large number of artificial equipment to it, he knew that this was just suppressing its power. Once this space creature regained its wild consciousness, he dared not imagine its destructive power. Fortunately, their civilization also raised this space creature in a volcano and healed its injuries. The current situation is that the fleet, which is not as numerous as the original, encountered a space creature that had recovered from its injuries. Sure enough, after releasing its wildness, the combat power of this giant creature soared. Before the corruptor fleet could react, it used its spikes to penetrate the intact warships near it again. Each of its spikes was strung with hundreds of corruptor warships, and the original hundreds of spikes also became tens of thousands halfway. Millions of corruptor warships were strung together like gourds and sucked dry into metal parts all over the sky. It's terrible. It has also taken away other genes of our leader. Help us. Kill it. The corruptor commander was sucked dry after he finished speaking. That's right, this space creature is no longer the space creature that existed thousands of years ago. After the body of the corruptor leader merged with it, a large number of excellent genes carried by it were also absorbed by this space creature. Now its combat power has soared to a higher level again. Your Majesty, I just received a message from scientists in the Empire. They know what this creature is. Tianyi suddenly came to Li Mingze's ear and said, "Oh? What is it?" Li Mingze asked anxiously. If he knew the origin of this creature, it would be very simple to find its weakness. This is a restoration of the huge skeleton we found on Mount Mingze. Tianyi put a 3D restoration map in front of Li Mingze. This is the 3D model of the space creature in front of us. Tianyi put another model in front of Li Mingze. Look, the similarity between these two creatures is 65.1%. If we ignore the differences between their species, and remove the errors in our restoration and hundreds of millions of years of evolution, these two creatures are of the same species. Tianyi pointed at the holographic screen and said, "Have our scientists found its weakness?" This is what Li Mingze is most concerned about at the moment. Yes, based on the reverse analysis of the genes in the skeleton of the giant creature in Mount X, we found that it has an excretion hole in its abdomen. This excretion hole is connected to its important organs, and its defense is very fragile. Tianyi enlarged the hologram of this creature and found a petal-shaped excretion hole in its abdomen. How much energy has our maintenance drone charged? Li Mingze suddenly thought of the killer weapon he had obtained from the previous generation of civilization. It's already charged 20%. You want to go from its? Tianyi looked at Li Mingze uncertainly. Smart. We will go from its chrysanthemum. Li Mingze smiled slyly. Dirty. Tianyi rolled his eyes at Li Mingze. Michigan, cut under this space creature. Under Tianyi's control, Michigan dived down and headed for the space creature's abdomen. The space creature's instincts for self-protection controlled it to also lower its head, trying to protect its life gate. But Li Mingze did not give it a chance. With his control of his mind, tens of thousands of maintenance drones swarmed out of the Michigan's warehouse and drilled into the space creature's anus. The thin layer of armor on the space creature's anus did not play any role and was cut open by the maintenance drone and drilled in. Then, everyone in the bridge saw that the space creature began to twist wildly in the air. Obviously, what happened in its body made it very painful. Tianyi turned his head and looked at Li Mingze, who was controlling the drone to drill around in the space creature with his eyes closed, and shook his head. A few minutes later, Li Mingze opened his eyes and looked at the space creature in the distance. I saw that the space creature was already floating in the space powerlessly, and its body was still twitching from time to time. Spots of black blood flowed out from its mouth and excrement. However, this time its muscles did not block the wound, but let the blood flow everywhere. The drone ran out of power at the right time, just in time to kill it. Li Mingze folded his arms together, a smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. Okay, now the corruptors are leaderless, it's time for List to come back. Notify List to return to the capital planet immediately to take charge of the corruptors. Also, Find a safe place to take out the drone from the space creature. Mingze turned his head and ordered Tianyi, and then returned to his lounge. The fleet is divided into 2 squadrons again. The first fleet leads the Marines to land on the corruptor capital planet to collect useful information. The second fleet will pull the space creature away, find a good place to hide it, and then take out the drone. Tianyi took over the command of the fleet. Yes, the fleet that was originally merged with the 2 dreadnoughts was separated again and divided into 2 squadrons. One of them carried the ground troops and flew to the capital star of the corruptors, while the other fleet pulled the space creature's spaceships and flew to the outer periphery of the capital star system. As they arrived at the outer periphery of the star system, the Crescent pulled the remains of the space creatures and jumped into hyperspace with the second fleet. At this time, many fleets far in front of the third line of defense of the Empire also received the news that the capital star had fallen, the head of the world had died, and the 3 fleets had been annihilated. Originally, everyone planned to kill the capital star of the Sith Empire, first to avenge the head of the world and their dead families. Unexpectedly, Liss disrupted their plan and retreated directly to the edge of the star system and jumped into hyperspace without notifying the other 4 fleets. This made the commanders of the other 4 fleets anxious. What if the damn Liss ran back first and they continued to attack the Sith Empire? By the time they had worked so hard to defeat the Sith Empire, their fleet would have been almost completely destroyed. When they returned home, they would probably find that the Liss family had already taken the throne of the head of state. With their strength greatly reduced, how could they compete with the Liss family? They would not do such a stupid thing as helping others. Let's go to. Saving the capital planet is more important. Several fleet commanders looked at each other tacitly, their eyes revealing a desire for power. The 4 fleets also rushed into hyperspace and flew towards the direction of the corruptor's capital planet. Chapter 333 Seizing Power. Your Majesty, the Emperor of the Sith, in order for me to receive the capital star smoothly, can you help me hold back the other 4 fleets behind? Mingze, who was far away in the capital star, suddenly received a secret communication from Liss. No problem, you can cooperate directly with our Marines after arriving at the capital star. Mingze nodded. Understood. Liss hung up the communicator. Although the Sith Empire killed the commander of the First Fleet, that is, his father, he had no deep feelings for him after thousands of years of separation. In addition, his father hindered him from taking control of the country's power, so even if the Empire killed his father, he didn't feel much. However, he still had to avenge the murder of his father. When he took control of the country's power and cleaned up his political enemies, he should settle accounts with the Sith Empire at that time. As for the parasitic alien in his body, he has found a solution. As long as he can return to the capital star, he can get rid of the alien in his body. At that time, the Sith Empire will no longer be able to threaten him. 20 days later, the drones in the space creatures had been dug out and cleaned, and the space creatures were pulled back to the star field of the Sith Empire by several warships from the safe corridor they came in. The 2 fleets that completed the mission reunited again and quietly floated in the orbit of the capital star. On the ground of the capital star, 1 million elite Marines from the Sith Empire, with the secret cooperation of the Sith warriors and the Shadow Force, have controlled all the important facilities on the ground. When this place was designed, it was not considered that other civilizations would be able to airdrop troops to the capital star on a large scale, so all the important troops were deployed on the periphery of the civilization. The entire capital star only has 2 million ground troops. However, these 2 million ground troops were easily defeated by the elite Imperial Marines with the orbital support of the Imperial warships and the cooperation of the Sith warriors and the Shadow Forces, and surrendered in an organized manner. After executing Plan S-001, we will intercept the fleet of the corruptors. In the bridge of the Michigan, Mingze sat in his command seat and ordered Monica. As you command, Your Majesty. Monica looked at Mingze with a speechless expression and turned away. She knew what the S-001 plan was. It was a cruel plan. 1 day later, after executing the S-001 plan, the Imperial fleet began to evacuate the orbit of the capital star. Only some cruisers and destroyers used to carry the Marines were left on the capital star. With a burst of light, the Imperial Expeditionary Fleet disappeared in the starry sky and flew towards the Proxima star system of the Corruptor's capital star system. At this time, Liss's fleet had also arrived at the star system next to the capital star system. The fleets of both sides passed by the periphery of the star system, and the commanders of both sides issued an order not to open fire. All the soldiers on the warships could only watch the enemy who had fought desperately pass by their warships quietly, and they could do nothing. Okay, all warships, listen up. Fire space mines forward, all main weapons start charging, we are ready for a big battle. Attention, our main goal in this battle is not to destroy them, our goal is to hold them back. The longer the better. Once the warships can no longer hold on, you can report and retreat. Never fight to the death. Mingze picked up the intercom and began broadcasting to the entire fleet. The Imperial warships that received the order began to spread out in all directions and formed a battle formation. At the same time, a number of floating mines were fired from the warships, slowly drifting towards the distant starry sky. The main guns of the warships were also aimed at the star field, and shells were placed on the track. It appears all main guns fire, and the warships are evading at high speed. I repeat, just hold them back, Mingze shouted after seeing the hyperspace fluctuations appearing in front of the screen. A few seconds later, nearly 15 million corruptor warships jumped out of the hyperspace and arrived in this galaxy. As soon as they jumped out of hyperspace, the four fleets collided with the floating mines launched by the Empire, and soon there were flashes of fire in the fleet. At this time, the main gun salvo of the Imperial fleet had also arrived, and countless shells and beams hit the warships that had just been hit by the floating mines. In less than 10 seconds, tens of thousands of warships in the corruptor fleet were destroyed, and the flames from the explosion illuminated the starry sky. All warships began to retreat, and the deployment of floating mines should not stop. Knowing that the range of the corruptor fleet far exceeded that of the Imperial fleet, Mingze did not linger in the battle, but left after a successful attack. When the main guns of the corruptor fleet's warships were about to be fully charged, the Imperial warships had already run out of the corruptor's range. In this way, the Imperial fleet ran in front, and the corruptor fleet chased behind. When the corruptor fleet wanted to give up and continue on their way, the Imperial fleet would fire a salvo at the corruptor out of range. Although the damage was limited, the corruptor fleet could only turn around and chase the Imperial fleet again. While the Imperial fleet was harassing, Lys had already reached the sky above the capital planet. With Lys's order, all the corruptor destroyers equipped with anti-gravity engines descended on the planet. My dear soldiers, today you follow me to regain the power of the country. When I ascend to the throne of the head of state, all your benefits will be doubled, and your military ranks will be promoted on the spot. In order to win over the corruptor soldiers in his fleet, Lys directly promised huge benefits. At this time, because Lys's father had died in the battle against the Empire, Lys was the highest-ranking military official in the family. In addition, senior officials in the government had been beheaded by the Shadow Force, and the resources of the Lys family could only be tilted to Lys. With the support of the family power, Lys's troops quickly settled down, and the guard troops on the capital planet also swore allegiance. There was no way, because he was the only one who could drive a warship to land on the capital planet, and other corruptor commanders didn't even see their shadows. Sir Lys, our emperor has sent me to hand over the military camps, manufacturing plants and other important facilities on your capital planet. Our empire's ground forces will cooperate with your soldiers. A communication suddenly connected to Lys's flagship. Lys did not speak, but nodded, and waved his hand toward the officers beside him to negotiate with the warships left by the Empire. Tens of minutes later, the corrupted soldiers who came down from Lys's warship walked towards various important facilities under the leadership of the Imperial soldiers. Chapter 334 Rebels. Soon, the entire corruptor capital planet had fallen into the hands of Lys's troops. The Imperial Marines also evacuated the corruptor capital planet one after another after handing over the occupied facilities to Lys's troops, and returned to the Imperial warships. A few hours later, in a square on the ground of the capital planet, thousands of corruptor soldiers lined up in 2 rows and stood in the center of the square. Hundreds of warships in the sky were floating in the air, guarding Lys's flagship. As Lys's flagship slowly landed in the center of the square from the air, the huge tentacles on the spaceship waved and inserted into the ground to firmly fix the spaceship in place. Then several tentacles on the abdomen of the spaceship began to slowly wriggle, wrapping Lys and sending him out of the warship. Long live the Führer! With a deafening shout, all the corruptor soldiers half knelt on the ground. Lys looked around in the air at his kneeling subordinates in the square, nodded with satisfaction, and fell to the ground. Wasn't it just for this day that he betrayed his country and succumbed to the tyranny of the Empire? After becoming the head of state, The air of the capital planet became sweet. "Hey, Mr. Head of State, we have taken back control of all facilities from the ground forces of the Sith Empire. Now the ground forces of the Empire have withdrawn to orbit and are flying out of the star system." The fatball like Li Da trotted to Liz and rubbed his hands. Li Da was just ready to take a gamble out of helplessness, but he didn't expect that the new master he followed would sit on the throne of the head of state so smoothly, and his position would also rise. "Very good, let's go to the head of state's office. I have been working in it for a long time." Liz nodded and walked towards the government building next to the square. That head of state, the head of state's office has been destroyed by the previous head of state when he transformed. We have requisitioned the original Capitol building as our temporary office. The old stubborn people in the Congress are all dead and no one will say anything. Li Da wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said, "Then let's go to the temporary office. You contact the military and announce that I have taken office as the new head of our country. Since senior officials and military leaders were lost in the attack by the Empire, anyone who pledges allegiance to me will have the opportunity to be promoted." Liz turned and walked towards his flagship, and ordered Li Da without looking back. "Yes, sir." Li Da bowed and ran away quickly. A few hours later, all the colonies in the entire Corruptor star field received a notice from the military and government of the Capital Star. In the Sith Empire's invasion of the Capital Star, as many as 70% of the military and government senior officials died, and the previous head of state also died in the battle with the Imperial fleet. Marshal Liss, who arrived in time and drove away the Imperial invaders, has become the new head of state. All colonies and fleets that receive the information should unconditionally pledge allegiance to head of state Liss. Any colony and fleet that does not pledge allegiance will be regarded as a betrayal of the country. Those who are unwilling to be loyal to the new head of state will be sentenced to death for treason. All fleets outside must immediately return to the Capital Star to accept the inspection of the new head of state and protect the Capital Star from further invasion by the Empire while forming a new fleet to encircle the Imperial fleet. The many colonies that received the news were dumbfounded. It had only been a few days, and they had originally been domineeringly going to flatten the star field of the Sith Empire, but they did not expect that the Sith Empire would beat them to the Capital Star in just a few months. Apart from other things, the three main fleets on duty at the Capital Star and the head of state's dreadnoughts were completely wiped out by the Sith Empire, which was simply unbelievable to them. However, now with the loss of the original high level and the destruction of several large fleets, the entire Corruptor can only control these colonies with 5 relatively complete fleets. Since someone has returned to the Capital Star to take over the government and form a new management team, it is better for these small colonies with only dozens or hundreds of warships to surrender. So many colonies that received the information sent praise and obedience to the new head of state to express their loyalty to the Capital Star. As time went on, the original first family, the family that controlled the second and third fleets of the Corruptor, lost their voice in the Corruptor civilization as the 2 fleets were mistakenly destroyed by the runaway dreadnoughts. They had no choice but to declare their allegiance to the new head of state, Liss, at the first time. The remaining 4 families, 2 of which were at the bottom, followed the idea of following anyone, and after communicating with the lobbyists sent by the Liss family, they also announced their allegiance to the head of state. The other 2 families were somewhat dissatisfied. How could Liss, who was originally ranked last among the 6 families, get the position of head of state? However, the informants of the 2 families on the capital planet sent back a message to the 2 families. The reason why Liss was able to return to the capital planet before the other 4 fleets and drive away the invaders of the Empire so quickly was because Liss had already colluded with the Sith Empire in secret. The evidence was that the ground forces of the Empire actually handed over the capital planet directly to Liss's troops, and the fleet of the Sith Empire was still outside the capital planet to block the entry of the other 4 fleets. This news reminded the 2 families of the fact that Liss's fleet did not work hard when attacking the Sith Empire's defense line and had extremely low combat efficiency. Combined with the fact that Liss was able to escape from the Sith Empire, killed so many warships of the Sith Empire, became an idol of their country, and even became the commander of a fleet, these were all calculated things. This Liss had already colluded with the Sith Empire in secret. The 2 families quickly came to a conclusion. After the 2 families held an emergency meeting to discuss, they were ready to take this opportunity to pull down Liss and replace him with someone from their 2 families, so that the entire Corruptor civilization would become the world of their 2 families. Soon after, a press conference was held in the colonies controlled by the 2 families. The two families took the opportunity to announce the evidence that the current head of state, Lys, was colluding with the Sith Empire. This new head of state is a traitor, and their two families and the people will not succumb to the rule of this traitor. This traitor who colluded with foreign enemies to harm his own country should be united and driven out of the position of head of state and sent to court for trial. But embarrassingly, no one cooperated with him, and the Congress that was originally able to restrain the power of the head of state was also slaughtered by the imperial troops. And the various colonies ignored them, and the managers and small families on these colonies unexpectedly remained silent. Chapter 335 Betrayal. Just when the two families were confused and puzzled, they found out that Lys was not to be outdone and announced that their two families had long been secretly trying to seize the national power and turn the country into the world of their two families. Now the two families have all been sentenced to death for treason. The fleets of the two families were listed as rebels, and the members of the two families were wanted at the first level. The colonies and fleets that destroyed the rebels will receive generous rewards. Whoever can take down the colonies originally occupied by the rebels will get them. Now the entire corruptor civilization is boiling. The original class solidification has caused many important and good resources to fall into the hands of the 6 major families. These small families, even those without a family, simply cannot obtain good resources from these families. But now it is different. The original first family has declined, and 2 families have become rebels. The resources of the 2 rebel families have become resources that they can obtain, and the resources within the corruptor civilization will be redistributed. They may double, triple, or even multiply their current assets. Now, big and small families on various colonies are gearing up to cut a few pieces of meat from the 2 rebel territories. Some small families with insufficient strength, who know their shortcomings, have united to form a joint fleet and divide the spoils according to the proportion of troops sent. This made the 2 families who have become rebels dumbfounded. They never expected that not only would no one agree with them to drive the traitor out of power, but they would actually want to add insult to injury. Before the news of the 2 families becoming rebels spread, among the 4 fleets chasing the imperial fleet, the 2 fleets that had already pledged allegiance to Lys suddenly turned against them and launched a close-range attack on the other 2 rebel fleets. The imperial fleet, which was originally chased by the 4 fleets, also turned back and rushed towards the fleets of the 2 rebel families. The 2 rebel fleets did not react at all and were caught off guard by the 2 fleets that had secretly colluded. They did not expect that the comrades who had just fought side by side with them would suddenly turn against them and mix with the original enemy, becoming their new opponents. The soldiers of the 2 rebel fleets were also confused. They didn't expect that the enemy they were chasing just now would become their teammates. However, they could only obey orders before they were given orders. These soldiers had to pick up their weapons and point them at their former comrades. A few hours later, the number of warships of the 2 rebel fleets was sharply reduced under the attack of the Sith Empire and the rebel fleet. Moreover, because they were located in the gravity well of the star, the 2 fleets could not jump into hyperspace urgently and were soon wiped out. 2 months later, the colonies of the 2 families were besieged for a long time by other small families of the corruptors, and a large number of colonies fell. Even the members of the 2 families who were in the colonies that had already pledged allegiance were eliminated on the spot by the local troops. The 2 rebellious families were wiped out by the corruptor fleet and the imperial fleet without even making a splash. Although the families achieved brilliant results, the fleets of the corruptor families loyal to Lys also suffered heavy losses in this battle to encircle and suppress the rebels. The Empire took advantage of the civil war among the corruptors to not only wipe out a large number of the corruptors' living forces, but also had extremely limited losses. The number of warships of the corruptor civilization was greatly reduced in this civil war. On the contrary, the Empire used these 2 months to frantically build a large number of destroyers and gathered them at the last line of defense. In a huge arc-shaped black building on the corruptor capital star, Lys took off all his clothes and lay down in an elliptical sealed cabin. As the hatch of the sealed cabin closed, the sealed cabin began to flash. In the sealed cabin, green rays swept down from the hatch in front of Lys, scanning his entire body from head to toe. The body is being reorganized outside the brain, and the original tissue is beginning to be eliminated. As the electronic sound of the sealed cabin sounded, the body of Lys in the sealed cabin except for the brain suddenly turned into shattered. The alien in Lys's spine also turned into dots of unknown matter and was sucked away. After all the debris in the sealed cabin was sucked away, the beam that originally scanned the body began to reprint a brand new body based on Lys's brain. In the flagship Michigan, which was being maintained in an asteroid belt, Mingze was suddenly awakened by Tianyi. Your Majesty, the alien signalingless body has disappeared. We can no longer control him. Tianyi seemed to have expected this day to come, and there was no trace of nervousness in his tone. This guy couldn't hold back after all. I gave him a chance to live, but he didn't cherish it. Alice, Mingze shook his head helplessly. At this time, in the capital star of the corruptor, Liz, who had recast his body, stood up from the open-sealed cabin and moved gently twice. Please use the nutrient solution, President. A medical staff member waiting on the side handed the nutrient solution in his hand to Liz. Liz took the nutrient solution and drank a few sips, frowning slightly. Can our remaining warships take down the fleet of the Sith Empire? Liz looked up at the officers in front of him. Although we have experienced a civil war, we are more than enough to take down the fleet of the Empire. Our fleet has quietly assembled on the capital star. As long as you, President, give an order, our super fleet will be able to sweep across the star field of the Sith Empire, an officer replied in a low voice with his eyebrows lowered and his eyes lowered. Very good, wait until 12 o'clock tonight, all warships will immediately surround the fleet of the Sith Empire, and we will catch the turtle in the jar. Liz clapped his hands with satisfaction. Soon, a super fleet composed of the remaining warships of the corruptor began to form a formation on the capital planet, and Liz also walked out of the government building, ready to board the cruiser docked in front of the government building. Just as he was about to leave the government building, time went back to the flagship Michigan 10 seconds ago. Mingze took a sealed metal box from Monica. As the metal box was placed on the console in front of Mingze reached out and placed his hand on the top of the metal box. With a flash of light, after identifying Mingze's DNA sequence, the metal box slowly opened upwards to reveal a red button inside. Let us observe a 3-second silence for Liz. After saying that, Mingze pressed the red button in the metal box furiously. After Mingze pressed the button, tens of thousands of super-large yield ground-penetrating nuclear warheads began to flash wildly deep underground near the center of the Earth in the corruptor capital planet. Chapter 336, Hidden Thunder. A few seconds later, tens of thousands of nuclear warheads exploded at the same time, and huge energy instantly rushed to the core of the planet. Tianyi, is your calculation correct? According to this distribution, can we really detonate the entire planet? Mingze was a little unbelievable. Although the equivalent of these nuclear warheads is large enough, it always feels that the power is still limited for a planet. Your Majesty, don't worry, there is no problem at all. We are equivalent to inserting a match into a pile of gunpowder. After the stimulation of these nuclear bomb explosions, the internal energy of this planet will completely explode, and then the entire planet will explode, Tianyi said confidently. As the energy generated by the explosion of these nuclear warheads rushed into the center of the Earth frantically, the originally stable center of the Earth energy system was instantly destroyed, and the violent energy began to rage in the center of the Earth. At this time, Liz on the ground suddenly felt a violent vibration, and with the vibration, the ground in front of Liz suddenly began to rise and fall. The wavy and undulating ground shook so much that he couldn't stand. Before Liz had recovered and thought about what happened, the surface of the entire planet began to be torn into tens of thousands of huge fragments. There were flashes of red light in the middle of these huge fragments, and countless magmas filled the gaps between the fragments. The huge power generated by the detonation of the Earth's core is currently bound by the crust of the capital planet. When the crust can no longer hold on, this incomparably huge energy will be released. Liz looked at the ground around him in horror as it broke into small pieces, and magma flowers spewed out from the cracks. The building behind him was also directly torn into debris all over the ground. After he waved away the dust in front of him with his hands, he suddenly found that the spaceship he was about to land on accelerated a breaking of the ground because of its huge weight, and the entire spaceship slowly slid into the magma. No, Liz shouted unwillingly, this was his only hope of escape. My lord the head of state. Just when Liz was desperate, a loud shout suddenly came from the air. A corruptor destroyer rushed towards this position. There was a fat man standing at the hatch of the battleship. This person was the first fat governor who followed him. As the tentacles on the destroyer suddenly extended down, Liz was rolled up and placed at the hatch. Liz took a deep breath to calm down, and looked at the fat governor with gratitude. My lord, this is what I should do. The fat governor understood Liss's eyes and replied respectfully, and then he turned around and closed the hatch tightly. The huge destroyer lightly touched the magma on the ground and pulled up the bow again, flying high into the sky. When the spacecraft just rose to a height of several thousand meters, the entire corruptor capital star began to vibrate violently, and even the air in the air was vibrated and interacted with the abnormal magnetic field to cause a strong airflow. The entire destroyer swayed left and right under the airflow, like a small boat in the stormy sea. Liss and the fat governor looked at each other with a touch of horror. They didn't know what happened to the capital star. It was said to be a natural disaster. But what kind of natural disaster could have such destructive power? My lord, strong earthquakes have been detected all over the world, and the source of the earthquakes is the center of the Earth of our capital planet, and the detection station at the center of the Earth reports that the center of our capital planet seems to have been stimulated by something and has become extremely unstable. The fat governor glanced at the report in his hand and reported to Liss with a serious expression. No matter what it is, it must be related to the Sith Empire. After I took out the alien in my body, the capital planet has undergone such a shocking change. I will never forgive the damn Sith Empire. Liss closed his eyes and clenched his fists. Yes. How dare they do this to our capital planet? The fat governor was suddenly interrupted by the prompt sound of the terminal in his hand. Sir, the latest news from the center of the Earth detection station is that the crust of the capital planet can no longer restrain the violent energy of the center of the Earth. Our capital planet is about to explode. Hiss. Hiss. A busy tone came from the communicator. Liss opened his eyes and looked at the fat governor. The two suddenly had a bad premonition. The premonition was correct. When the two received the warning message, the crust of the entire capital planet could no longer hold on. The entire capital planet suddenly exploded outward, and the bright red magma splashed around like the juice of bursting berries. Countless fragments were pushed outward by the impact force generated by the detonation of the Earth's core, and soon they were accelerated to very fast speed. The corruptor destroyer that was about to escape from the capital planet was submerged by boulders in the blink of an eye. The huge impact force instantly tore the shield and armor of the warship. Feeling the vibration of the spacecraft, Liss and the fat governor looked at each other in despair, and then the two of them completely lost consciousness. The warship they were riding turned into powder under the impact of the fragments of the capital planet, and Liss and the fat governor died without a burial place. At this time, the corruptor fleet in orbit was shocked by the scene in front of them. Many corruptors were dazed. They never thought that their capital planet would explode in front of them without any warning. Watching the capital star in front of them shattering bit by bit, turning into countless fragments and shooting out in all directions, the corruptors were shouting in disbelief in their hearts, and they didn't react until the fragments were about to fly in front of them. Warning: this fleet will encounter the impact of planetary fragments in 5 seconds. Please prepare for defense. Warning: this fleet will encounter the impact of planetary fragments in 2 seconds. Please prepare for defense. As the piercing alarm sounded in the warships, the assembled corruptor warships wanted to disperse in all directions. But it was too late. The huge fragments, which were hundreds of meters long on average, hit the corruptor fleet originally in the orbit of the capital star like a rainstorm. Pieces of fragments hit the shields of the corruptor warships, and the kinetic energy they carried easily tore the shields of the warships apart. After tearing the shields of the corruptor warships apart, the fragments continued to crash into the body of the corruptor warships. The immense kinetic energy instantly charged the energy absorption tissue of the corruptor to its upper limit. With the effect of the magma explosion, the corruptor warships were hit by the fragments and turned into tiny debris all over the sky. These debris continued to rush towards the next corruptor warship along with the fragments of the capital planet. This attack continued until the kinetic energy of the fragments of the capital planet was completely consumed. The fragments of the capital planet that had been melted by high temperature had long been smashed into pieces, and in the end they directly turned into the effect of shotguns. The corruptor fleet, which thought it had escaped a disaster, ushered in the lava rain following the fragments. Because there is no heat dissipation medium such as air in space, the magma can only release heat outward through thermal radiation. Chapter 337: Falling Apart. When they flew over the corruptor fleet, the original magma was only covered with a thin layer of cooled magma shell. These egg-like magma bombs madly crashed into the intact battleship formation in the corruptor fleet. First, the kinetic energy was released on the corruptor shield to shatter the shield, and then the broken magma continued to fly forward and pasted on the outer armor of the corruptor battleship. The continuous high temperature instantly dissolved these corruptor battleships, and soon, only a small number of seriously injured battleships were left in the originally super-large corruptor fleet. Most of the battleships were lost in this super fireworks show. Mingze, who was far away, had seen everything that happened here on the capital star through the detector. He nodded with satisfaction, and then commanded the fleet to jump into hyperspace and fly towards the corruptor's capital star system. It's time to pick peaches. When they knew that the super fleet composed of their various colonies was actually wiped out by the explosion of the capital star, the various corruptor colonies were in chaos. Now they had lost all the power to defend against the invasion of the Sith Empire fleet. They were like a piece of meat on a chopping board, waiting for the Sith Empire to swing its butcher knife. A few days later, the fleet of the Sith Empire jumped out of hyperspace from all directions and tightly surrounded the capital star system of the corruptor. The remnants of the corruptor fleet, which were recovering in the meteorite belt formed by the explosion of the capital star, were also surrounded by the Imperial fleet. After seeing that they had no chance of winning, the remnants of the corruptor fleet wisely surrendered to the Sith Empire fleet. All the corruptor warships entangled their tentacles together, the doors of the main guns were tightly closed, the propellers at the rear gradually lost their light, and the drivers also controlled the tentacles to detach themselves from the sturdy warships and came into space. The Imperial fleet was satisfied to imprison the surrendered corruptors in the warships, and their warships were destroyed on the spot. The corruptor colonies scattered throughout the corruptor star field no longer had the power to stop the Imperial fleet. Soon, the expeditionary fleet of the Sith Empire was split into 10 squadrons, which would go to the border of the corruptor star field to join the transport ships and landing ships coming from the Empire. At that time, each squadron would carry up to 500,000 combat robots and 500,000 Imperial Marines, plus 1 million orbital airborne troops and 1 million alien landing troops. After the Imperial warships cleared the orbital defense facilities of the corruptor colony, the Imperial army would descend on the corruptor colony and enslave the corruptors into slaves of the Empire. 20 days later, in an ordinary colony in the corruptor star field, Runus was a corruptor soldier with enhanced ground combat capabilities. Since their capital planet fell and exploded, their joint fleet was also buried with a capital planet. Soldiers from various colonies were dispatched to various fortresses in the city to prepare to resist the attack of the Imperial airborne troops. Because Runus was on vacation at the seaside with his wife during this period, he knew nothing about what happened on the capital planet. It was not until he was approached by the military in the hotel lobby that he realized that his huge country was on the verge of destruction. The Sith Empire, which they had despied, had already destroyed their proud fleet. According to the alarm from the frontline hyperspace observatory, a large number of spaceships flew out of the Sith Empire and headed towards their star region. There is no doubt that these spaceships must be carrying the ground forces of the Sith Empire. Runus's superiors ordered these land-based corruptors to fight to the last drop of their blood to hold back the ground forces of the Sith Empire. As long as they can hold off until their new batch of warships are grown, their civilization will still have a chance. Even if they can't win at that time, they can evacuate with important scientists and elites, so as not to be wiped out by the Sith Empire. After Runus packed his luggage, he boarded the transport spaceship that had been waiting at the door of the hotel. There are many corruptor soldiers who are on vacation like him in this hotel, dedicated to low-level corruptors. Now these people and he will go to the nearest city to garrison. Just as he put his luggage on the tentacles of the transport ship, several dazzling flashes suddenly appeared in the sky. Then countless meteors streaked through the sky, leaving trails in the sky. The Sith Empire is too fast. They have already pushed the front line here, a junior officer next to Runus muttered to himself. Why do you say that? Runus asked nervously. He didn't expect why the Sith Empire fleet, which the military said was still attacking planets several light years away, appeared here. According to the military, in order to assimilate the occupied planets into production as soon as possible, the Sith Empire's fleet attacked our colonies from the side where the Sith Empire is. They need to hand over to their military police after taking a colony. The junior officer shook his head and said, "What should we do?" Before Runus finished speaking, a red beam of light fell from the sky and melted through the transport ship in front of him and the junior officer. The transport ship, which had been melted through most of its body, twitched twice and fell to the ground, its body slowly becoming stiff. The corruptor soldiers who had entered the transport ship did not even have time to scream before they were melted into gas along with the transport ship. What are you still standing there for? Let's go into the hotel. The junior officer grabbed Runus' arm and pulled him towards the hotel behind him. Only then did Runus react and turned around and ran away. As expected by the experienced junior officer, the targets of these beams of light were the combat units and important military facilities exposed in the open space. The hotel they were in was a civilian facility and was not within the attack range of this orbital weapon. The junior officer did not guess that after the Imperial fleet cleared the defense facilities in the orbit of the Corruptor colony star, it launched hundreds of automatic orbital attack satellites towards the planet. These automatic orbital attack satellites, which were as big as several buses in the Earth era, entered their respective orbits with the help of thrusters. After launching the orbital attack satellite, the Empire's fleet did not stop, but continued to rush to the outer reaches of the star system, jump into hyperspace and disappeared. They will push all the way to the entire territory of the Corruptor, and the star systems that have been cleared in the middle will launch orbital attack satellites to clear obstacles for the ground forces that will arrive later. No one has subscribed to this. I am hesitating whether to turn on the anti-piracy version. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338 Crushing. This method of advancement was also the main reason why the Corruptor military could not correctly judge the speed of the Imperial fleet. After losing accurate judgment, many Corruptor colonies were breached by the Imperial fleet before they were ready. As countless orbital attack satellites were scattered over the colonies, the Corruptor troops that had not yet moved to the fortifications were caught off guard. For example, the colony where Runus was located. The orbital attack satellites in orbit constantly adjusted their angles and aimed at the Corruptor troops that were gathering on the ground. These Corruptor troops were not prepared to deal with the Imperial orbital attack because of wrong intelligence. They were still on their way to the fortifications when the attack satellites in orbit fired beams at them. These red beams were like the deadly god of death, melting the Corruptor troops without shelter into pools of liquid. After several hours, the colony was covered with traces of crystallization after the orbital beam cannon attack. Large areas of land were burned into glass after being hit by the high-temperature energy beams, referred to the center of the nuclear explosion. Runus, who had managed to escape into the hotel basement while the attack satellite was charging, breathed a sigh of relief. This hotel was originally built with air raids in mind, so the basement also served as an air raid shelter. The entire basement was wrapped in thick armor, and even the powerful beam cannon outside could hardly penetrate this layer of armor. Sure enough, the orbital attack satellite paused for a second after scanning the hotel. After a slight calculation, it was found that it was impossible to knock open the armor of the hotel basement in a short time, and the attack satellite shifted its target. However, the good luck of Runus and the low-ranking officer ended there. A huge fleet composed of Imperial transport ships and landing ships appeared on the periphery of the colony star system. This fleet was the Imperial landing fleet that had just dealt with a Corruptor colony star and rushed here. It is interesting to say that after the Corruptor fleet was killed by the Empire, the Corruptor ground forces that had experienced the orbital attack did not form any effective counterattack after the Empire's landing forces arrived. They only resisted a few times before surrendering. The landing troops had never thought that the fierce and warlike Corruptors would surrender so quickly, but this also made their advancement speed faster. The losses during the landing operation were smaller, and more Corruptors were captured, which was exactly what the Empire was happy to see. Begin landing. The first batch of alien troops, the second batch of combat robot troops, the third batch of orbital death troops, the fourth batch of Imperial Marines. As the Imperial landing fleet flagship issued one command after another, countless alien-specific landing chambers fell to the ground like raindrops. Because the orbital attack satellites had been cleared, the Imperial airborne troops received few attacks, and the firepower was also not concentrated. Of course, this is also related to the combat concept of the Corruptor civilization, because they have troops that focus on strengthening ground combat capabilities, so they prefer to let the enemy's landing troops in for hand-to-hand combat. Because of this, the Corruptor's air defense force is pitifully small, and the already scarce air defense firepower has been plowed by the orbital attack satellites. It is conceivable how much can be left. Countless alien landing pods smashed into the tower-like buildings of the incubators. As the hatches of the landing pods bounced outward, the densely packed aliens disappeared into the dark corridors of the corruptors' buildings. Soon, screams could be heard from these buildings. It wouldn't be long before many corpses were carried by the aliens to the city center. The place they were going to was the alien Hatch Tower spacecraft that had landed in the city center. As the corpses of the corruptors were thrown into the Hatch Tower, more powerful aliens were produced from the Hatch Tower. After a short battle of half an hour, the sky flashed with fire again. Landing pods filled with combat robots smashed next to some hard shells that the alien troops could not capture. Combat robots with flashing shields rolled from the landing pods into the corruptors' firepower network. As soon as these combat robots came between the corruptors and the alien troops, they began to transform, revealing their machine guns. As the robot's machine gun flashed a dazzling light, one corruptor soldier after another was torn to pieces by the machine gun's shells. The corruptors' firepower network quickly became sparse under the robot's attack, and the alien troops took the opportunity to rush into the corruptors' battle formation. Soon, there were bursts of screams. Then, transport ships loaded with orbital airborne troops landed in various cities that had been cleared by alien and robot troops. Wolf Spider armored vehicles and mammoth tanks roared down from the decks of the transport ships and drove into the city. Following closely behind were neat rows of Imperial orbital death soldiers. These soldiers disappeared into the high-rise buildings of the city with rifles raised. Their mission was to ensure that all buildings were completely cleared and prepared for the subsequent enslavement work of the military police. The hotel where Runus was located happened to be located in the second batch of clearing targets of the alien troops. At this time, many surviving corruptor soldiers had joined the defense line formed by Runus and low-level officers. They relied on the bone bullet machine guns in their arms to resist the alien troops. But with the arrival of dozens of combat robots, in just a few tens of seconds, half of the soldiers in their defense line were killed by these combat robots. These combat robots ignored their attacks with their thick shields, and the power of the machine guns in their hands was extremely terrifying. And then because the firepower network collapsed, the alien troops that rushed into their defense line were the existence that made Runus terrified. These aliens can pierce a corruptor soldier with a light claw. Just when the pierced corruptor soldier wanted to make a final blow, the tail thorn inserted from the other direction pierced the soldier's head. There are countless such situations. The claws of these aliens seem to ignore their hard armor. The armor and energy-absorbing tissue that they are proud of are like a ball of tofu under the claws of these aliens. They don't know that after the Empire obtained this energy-absorbing tissue, it began to study in depth how to crack it. Until the end. The Empire discovered that all the claws of the upgraded aliens with energy-absorbing tissue can ignore this energy-absorbing tissue. It was as if they stopped working after they met each other. The aliens' claws could easily pierce the alien's shell, which also had energy-absorbing tissue, and the energy-absorbing tissue did not provide any protection. This is also the reason why the Empire listed the alien as the first batch of airborne troops. Runus watched his comrades being torn and pierced by the aliens, and his spirit collapsed. Chapter 339, Prisoner Transformation. I surrender. I surrender. After seeing the low-ranking officers with him being shot in the head by the aliens, Runus hurriedly raised his hands and squatted on the ground. A tail spike that was inserted into his head was quickly lifted up in the air and rubbed against Runus' scalp. Runus was so frightened that he broke out in a cold sweat. If he had surrendered half a second later, he might have been pierced through the head. Fortunately, these monsters understood his surrender, so he was lucky to escape. Many aliens seemed to have known his surrender. One by one, the aliens passed by him without touching him at all. Runus was relieved. After seeing that they would not be shot in the head if they surrendered, the other surviving corrupt soldiers also raised their hands and squatted on the ground. Why should they risk their lives for the evacuation of those elites? If they died, what would the continuation of civilization have to do with them? The corrupt soldiers who had surrendered on the ground kept thinking this in their hearts, looking for reasons for their cowardice and fear of death. Of course, there were also soldiers who would rather die than surrender for their country. Several corrupted soldiers glared at Runus and others squatting on the ground with disdain, and drew their sabers and rushed into the aliens. A few seconds later, accompanied by screams, the corrupted soldiers who rushed into the alien array were torn into countless pieces of meat. After confirming that the enemies on the battlefield had been cleared, the aliens raised their heads and roared twice. Soon, A small transport ship of the Sith Empire arrived at the square in front of the hotel. Dozens of Sith Empire's orbital airborne death soldiers walked out of the transport ship, and their rifles occasionally swept over the corrupted soldiers who had been lined up under the threat of the aliens. "Put it on them," an officer in the orbital death soldiers waved his hand. Dozens of soldiers came forward in groups of 3, 2 of them grabbed the corrupted's arms, and the other put a metal ring on the corrupted's neck. Soon, each captive had a metal ring on his neck. "This is a self-destruct ring. If you do anything bad or leave the range we have set, it will explode. This ring will explode your heads with a bang." The Imperial Death Troops officer stood in front of the surrendered corruptors and threatened. "Yes, sir." Hundreds of corruptor captives lowered their arrogant heads. "Take them away. Send them to the prisoner camp." Teams of captives boarded the transport ship under the escort of the Imperial Death Troops soldiers. Tens of minutes later, these corruptor captives came to the sky above a semicircular building. This semicircular black building is the evolution center of the original corruptors. Low-level and mid-level corruptors all complete their evolution in this evolution center, transforming from an ordinary person into a corruptor. "Follow me, don't run around." The Imperial Death Troops officer pointed his gun at many corruptor captives, turned around and walked down from the transport ship, and came to the apron of the evolution center. At this time, dozens of small transport ships were parked on the apron, and thousands of corrupted captives were walking towards the gate of the evolution center under the guard of the Sith Empire's death squad. After dozens of minutes of walking, Runus and many captives were taken to an evolution hall. Runus curiously looked through the gate and saw a corrupted person entering the evolution cabin under the command of the Imperial soldiers. After a few minutes, the person came out again and left from the other end of the evolution hall. This made Runus confused. What did the Sith Empire mean by this? Why did they let them enter the evolution center and then leave again? Did they intend to remove the evolution genes in them? With a lot of questions in his mind, Runus finally got his turn after waiting in line for half an hour. He walked into the evolution center nervously, followed the instructions and entered an empty evolution cabin. His eyes went dark and he lost consciousness. Energy-absorbing tissue genes are being removed, and various combat capability genes are being removed. All genes have been removed, and the strength and endurance genes are being enhanced. All relevant genes are being transferred for injection. On the display screen that Runus could not see, a series of data flashed. Runus, lying in the evolution cabin, had lost all combat capability enhancements, but now he had terrifying strength and endurance. After a few minutes, the gene adjustment was completed, and Runus slowly woke up. He left the evolution hall in a daze and followed the crowd to the next location. In the control room on the second floor of the evolution hall, Mingze was standing in front of the French window looking down, and there were several scientific researchers standing behind him. Yes, these evolved corruptor bodies are easy to use. The resources consumed by readjusting the genes are so few, and the time used is also short. They are good materials. Mingze looked at the crowd in the hall with satisfaction. Yes, Your Majesty, and these corrupted soldiers don't have to worry about genetic collapse. They will be our best tools and we will make the best use of them, a scientist replied respectfully, with a sinister smile on his lips. On the other side, Runus, led by the Imperial soldiers, came to a locker room in a daze. Clean up your bodies and put on the tights in front of you. I only give you 20 minutes, the Imperial soldier closed the door and turned away. 20 minutes later, the corrupted captives wearing tights were neatly led out of the locker room by the Imperial soldiers and came to a boarding gate. A large transport ship was parked outside the boarding gate. Runus and others were puzzled. Where was the Sith Empire going to transport them? Hurry up and get on board. Don't dawdle. The Imperial soldier who followed the team pulled out an electric whip from his waist and whipped a corrupted leader of the team. If it was the original corruptor, he would not feel any pain at all for this level of attack, but now he suddenly felt as if he was pierced by thousands of thick needles, and great pain came from all over his body. In an instant, he thought that the tights on his body might have the effect of amplifying pain, and stretched out his hand to take off the tights on his body. But no matter how hard he tried, no matter how hard he pulled, he could not tear the tights apart. The tights seemed to grow on his skin. Don't waste your time. This tights is made of biological nanomaterials. It has been integrated with you. When you deform, it will also expand. You can't tear it apart. It also has the advantage of saving you the trouble of taking a shower in the future. Of course. It can also amplify the pain caused by electric current, the Imperial soldier said proudly. I'm finally free. I'll pay back the chapter I owe to the knight tomorrow. Chapter 340 Battleship Hatchery. The corrupted captives looked at the soldier angrily and gradually surrounded him. The Imperial soldier sneered disdainfully and thrust the electric whip in his hand into the floor. Countless arcs of electricity jumped from the floor under the soldier's feet to the corrupted soldiers. A scream like a pig being slaughtered sounded, and many corrupted captives knelt on the ground in pain and kept wailing. After these corrupted captives struggled painfully for a few seconds, the Imperial soldiers pulled the electric whip from the ground. Do you have any objections? The Sith Empire soldier asked the captives with narrowed eyes. No more, the captives trembled all over and answered hurriedly, fearing that they would experience the pain again if they said it too late. Very good, keep going, the Imperial soldier waved the electric whip in the air with satisfaction. The captives continued to line up and pass through the trestle to enter the transport ship. Tens of minutes later, the transport ship full of corrupted captives took off into the starry sky. At this time, the battle on this colony star was still going on tensely. To the surprise of the Empire's landing troops on this planet encountered a tenacious resistance from the corruptors, and the number of corruptors far exceeded that of other colonies, which greatly prolonged the Empire's occupation of this colony. On other colonies, the corruptors surrendered to the Empire after a brief battle after the Empire's landing troops landed. It was not until the Empire's ground troops broke into the underwater buildings of this colony that they found out the reason. As Mingze hurriedly entered an underwater passage in the largest ocean of this planet, the secrets of the deep sea of this planet gradually appeared before his eyes. Huge vesicles that could not be seen at a glance floated in the seawater, and the surface of the vesicles also emitted a little yellow light. These vesicles seemed to contain the larvae of some creatures, and all the vesicles were trembling regularly. Your Majesty, this is the first battleship hatchery we found to hatch corruptor warships, Monica, who was following behind Mingze, whispered, as if she was afraid of disturbing these gestating warships. No wonder the resistance on this planet is much stronger than other planets. It turns out that there is a battleship hatchery here. The corruptors intend to delay us so that these battleships can mature. Mingze shook his head gently. It should be, Your Majesty. We have discovered 32 hatcheries on this planet. Each hatchery is equipped with a corresponding equipment manufacturing workshop. These discovered hatcheries can produce up to 32,000 corruptor battleships in one round, and there are more than 60 planets in the corruptor star field that we have not yet advanced to. We don't know if there are battleship hatcheries on these planets, but even if only half of them have, it will be a great obstacle to our occupation, and some of our squadrons will become dangerous, Monica said with a serious expression. Find out the drivers of these corruptor battleships. If these corruptor battleships are modified, they will be very good transport ships, especially their tentacles that can extend freely. Mingze thought of something and turned to Tianyi beside him and said, We captured all the battleship drivers when we attacked this hatchery. Now they have been detained and are waiting for brainwashing. Tianyi, who was standing next to Monica, nodded and replied hurriedly. Very good. If we can use these corruptor facilities in the future to replace our original medium-sized transport ships with faster building and stronger biological transport ships, it will greatly save our production capacity, and we can use this saved production capacity to produce more battleships. After saying this, Mingze continued to walk into the battleship hatchery. The numerous huge vesicles on both sides of the road reflected each other beautifully. People who didn't know would never guess what kind of hideous creatures were bred in these vesicles. Soon, the biologists and other scientific researchers of the Empire also used the Advent substitute to come to the battleship hatchery of this planet and began to extract the biological battleship technology of the corruptor and add it to the Empire's technology library. With the help of Tianyi, these technologies related to biological battleships were quickly integrated with the Empire's technology, and all technologies that could be replaced by the Empire's technology had been replaced with more familiar Empire technologies. Mingze did not directly remove the corruptor warships that were being hatched, but planned to wait until they were fully grown and used as experimental subjects. The manufacturing facilities related to the biological transport ships using the Imperial technology have begun construction in the Imperial star field. Once the experimental ship is successful, the corruptor warship hatchery that the Empire has occupied will begin to produce transport ships at full capacity, and the former corruptor warship drivers will also be transferred to transport ship drivers until the Imperial technology develops to the point where ordinary Imperial people can also drive these biological transport ships. Unlike these corruptor warship drivers who are being brainwashed and controlled, Runas and others who have been genetically modified have no idea what kind of life they will usher in. As Runas's transport ship jumped out of hyperspace, a purple nebula appeared outside the porthole of the transport ship. A purple planet flashing with electric light quietly floated on the left-hand side of the transport ship and rotated slowly. A huge space station with a diameter of tens of kilometers was suspended in orbit above this purple planet. 8 thick trestles extend outward from the space station, which are also covered with huge storage bins and pipelines. The entire space station looks a bit rough, contrary to the normal appearance of the beautiful appearance of the Imperial space buildings. Below the space station, hundreds of metal cables with a diameter of more than 10 meters extend all the way to the ground of the purple planet and disappear in the purple clouds flashing with electric light. As the transport ship shut down the main thruster, several small tugboats flew out of the space station and towed the transport ship to the trestles extending from the space station. Dozens of transport ships have been docked on these trestles, and from time to time 1 or 2 will take off and disappear in the starry sky. Wake up. Everyone, prepare to enter the space station. An Imperial soldier opened the door of the cabin where Runas was, and frantically knocked on the wall with the handle of the electric whip. The huge metal collision woke up the people who were sleeping in their seats. The awakened people saw the scenery outside through the portholes, and they were shocked. After more than 10 days of flying, have they finally reached their destination? Welcome to No Star, here we will make you feel the warmth of home. Runas walked through the corridor connecting the transport ship and the space station, came to the huge trestle passage of the space station, and saw the holographic images on the walls around him. The smiling woman in the image made him shudder. He knew that this slogan was definitely not prepared for them. Chapter 341: A Miserable Beginning. The standard Imperial language sounded in the holographic screen. If it weren't for the war, all the corruptors had learned the Imperial language, and he wouldn't have known it. Being sent to this unknown remote star system, Runas, walking in the dim corridor, had an ominous premonition in his heart. At this time, a team of hundreds of Imperials wearing dirty miners' uniforms came towards them. Each of these Imperials carried a piece of luggage, and passed by them with a happy smile on their cheeks. This made Runas and others breathe a sigh of relief and continue to move forward. Tens of minutes later, Runas and others were escorted to a huge circular hall. As an alarm sounded, there was a sound of exhaust from the bottom of the hall, as if something entered the space station through the airlock. Everyone retreat outside the yellow line. The Imperial soldiers waved the electric whip and shouted loudly. Many corruptor captives obediently retreated until they were far away from the yellow warning line. After a slight vibration, a cylindrical elevator rose from the ground in the hall. The entire elevator was 50 meters in diameter and 10 meters high. With a sound of mechanical operation, the elevator door opened to both sides, revealing a thick elevator door in a layer of black sealing tape. Take your respirators and get in quickly. The Imperial soldier pointed to the rows of respirators on the wall not far away. The corrupted captives lined up to get their respirators and stood in the elevator. After the Imperial soldier took a look at the corrupted, he reached out and pulled the lever on the control console next to him. The heavy alloy door of the elevator was tightly locked together, and the elevator entered darkness. Everyone could only hear the breathing around them. After a while, several alcohol lamps sealed in the walls of the elevator began to appear on the walls, and the ventilation holes in the elevator began to slowly spray out oxygen. With a click, the metal buckle that fixed the elevator opened outward, and the elevator fell to the ground of the purple planet with a harsh metal friction sound. As the elevator descended at high speed, the 4 thin cables on the top of the elevator that were wrapped around the more than 10-meter thick metal cable in the middle gradually tightened, and the elevator's descent slowed down. As the winch in the space station slowly released the metal cable, the elevator slowly slid down the thickest metal cable into the purple cloud layer. Gusts of wind blew, causing the elevator to shake slightly, but because the steel cable in the middle was straight, the shaking was not obvious. However, the hail mixed in the wind at the outer shell of the elevator and made a series of knocking sounds, which made Runas and others who could not see the outside scene panic. However, soon, the knocking sound disappeared, and the elevator stabilized. After dozens of minutes, a heavy landing sounded, and the elevator stopped steadily on the ground. The elevator door opened to both sides under the force of the staff outside. Welcome to hell, Newcomers, several corruptors who were also wearing tights stood at the elevator door. Our job is to go to the nearby mining area, sort out the minerals and send them back to the space station, and the space station will return us with survival supplies. The more ores you hand in, the more survival supplies you will receive. Sometimes there will be rewards of cigarettes and alcohol. Start your new life. The corruptors who came to greet them took out the survival supplies in the elevator and walked towards the distant settlement without looking back. This purple planet was discovered by the Empire's deep space exploration ship. After launching a drone towards this planet, it was found that the drone lost its signal after entering the clouds of this planet. This attracted the Empire's great attention. It should be known that the various radiation shielding capabilities of the detection drones are specially enhanced. If they can make them lose their signals, it is generally not a particularly special geographical environment or there are alien relics. Later, the Empire sent several scientific research exploration ships here, but they found that they could not understand what kind of world was hidden under the thick clouds of this planet. In the end, there was no choice but to use a steel cable to hang an escape capsule into the clouds of this planet. According to the description of the volunteers, under the clouds of this planet is a purple world, and huge purple crystals stand on the ground, emitting dots of purple light. There are also countless purple crystal particles floating in the clouds of this planet. These crystal particles rub against each other, releasing a lot of energy and forming a special magnetic field. This is why the outer layer of this planet is covered with a thick layer of purple glowing clouds, and the reason why the drone lost contact is that the electronic equipment was destroyed by this special magnetic field. This magnetic field will destroy all electronic equipment that landed on this planet. After trying hundreds of different anti-electromagnetic technologies, the Empire had no choice but to give up the idea of allowing electronic equipment to enter this planet. The inability to use electronic equipment and the characteristics of never seeing the sun are the reasons why it is called the Starless Planet. The Empire originally planned to use this planet as a scientific research planet to study the special environment here. Who would have thought that from these crystal minerals, the Empire discovered a new substance that, after artificial synthesis, can be used as an important manufacturing material for the Empire's next generation of beam weapons. There was no other way. In order to develop the mineral resources on this planet, the Empire could only establish a preliminary mining base on this planet by hanging an elevator down with a rope. Without the use of electronic equipment, they could only use manpower to dig for this precious mineral resource. Helplessly, the Empire could only draw a large number of laborers from the subordinate races and the Empire's serious criminals to this planet to mine. The high salary also attracted many young people from the Empire to come here to serve as leaders of the miners. However, the power of manpower is limited after all. The inefficiency of mining is so low that Mingze cannot bear it. This low speed seriously affects the popularization of the Empire's new beam weapons. But now it is different. The corruptors who have been genetically modified with strength and endurance have become the best candidates for miners. They can have great power without machinery, which is perfect for a planet where electronic equipment cannot be used. Since the arrival of the first batch of corruptor captives, the Imperial miners on this planet have gradually evacuated from the Starless Planet. The group of people that Ronus met on the pier were the last group of Imperial miners to evacuate from the Starless Planet. Now, all the miners on the planet have been replaced by prisoners of the corruptor civilization, and only a few Imperial soldiers remain as managers of these corruptors. After being sent to this planet, these corruptors can no longer leave. The only way to enter and exit this planet is through 320 space elevators driven by top winches. Chapter 342 Wormhole Expressway and Ruins, additional chapter for Saber Knight. There are no electronic devices in these elevators. The elevators are lifted and lowered by the space station to pull up and lower the steel cables. At 8 o'clock every night, the corruptor miners need to stack the excavated minerals into containers and put them in the elevators. After the minerals in the elevators are loaded onto the transport ship and taken away, the space station will put the corruptors' survival supplies into the elevators and transport them to the ground. In order to prevent the corruptors from escaping along the elevators, each elevator will be scanned and sterilized at high temperature in the isolation cabin when it rises, and the vacuum for half an hour will make any corruptors who try to sneak and die without a burial place. After the elevators are lifted into the space station, there will be robot troops guarding the elevator door. Even if there are corruptors who can evade the previous review procedures, they cannot break through the defense line of the combat robots. It can be said that once they are put on this planet, in order to survive, they can only continue to dig minerals for the Empire. If they want to obtain more luxury goods, such as cigarettes, alcohol, stimulants, small movies, etc., then these corruptors need to work overtime. The more minerals they dig, the more luxury goods they get. Through this incentive method, these corrupted people feel that there is still a glimmer of hope in life, and it is not worth dying. It can also increase their enthusiasm for mining. Since these corrupted miners replaced the miners of the Empire, the amount of amethyst collected has been rising steadily. As more corrupted captives are transformed and sent to the Starless Star, the Empire's latest beam weapons will soon be popularized throughout the army and put into the battlefield. Just after Runus arrived on the Starless Star and began mining, the Imperial fleet in the distance had already advanced to the heartland of the corrupted civilization. Because the corrupted fleet had been completely lost, the Imperial fleet's advancement was unusually smooth. Basically, it was in a state where it only needed to fight for half an hour in a star system, and then leave after the battle. A lot of time was wasted on the road, which also made Mingze hate it. If the time on the road could be saved, his fleet should have flattened the corrupted star field long ago. It seems that the wormhole high-speed channel is about to be prepared for construction. Mingze sat at the desk in the flagship lounge, with his chin in his hand and thought. The technology of the wormhole channel comes from the wormhole generator under the current Sith Star. After cracking some of the key technologies, the Empire has been able to activate a wormhole on a small scale. However, due to technical limitations, the size of this wormhole channel is still very awkward. It can only pass through warships below the battleship, and the energy consumed is an astronomical figure. The Empire can only rely on stars to build this wormhole. However, once the wormhole channel is built, the journey that originally took 10 days to fly using existing hyperspace technology will only take 1 day to reach the destination in the wormhole channel. This speed is very important for the Empire, which has now spread its territory to the corrupter civilization star territory. And with the improvement of technology, the cruising speed of the Empire's warships will increase, and the speed of passing through the wormhole will be greatly improved. In the future, it will even take only 1 hour to reach the destination. Unlike the need to move the entire planet, the speed of a spacecraft that can move at high speed by itself through a wormhole is much faster than the original Sith Star, or Earth. The high-speed connection between star systems means that the mobility of the population will be greatly enhanced, and some minerals and organic matter that cannot be transmitted by some material transmission equipment will also circulate more rapidly, and the development of the Empire will move to a new level. However, the construction of such a wormhole high-speed network requires a lot of resources. It not only requires the construction of a giant wormhole exciter, but also the construction of an energy extraction station next to the star. Thinking of this, Mingze's thoughts drifted to the Dyson sphere again. He remembered that the space merchant seemed to want to sell him the blueprint of the Dyson sphere. If the Dyson sphere can be built, the huge energy obtained at that time will be enough to build a wormhole high-speed network, and even a wormhole channel between two planets in the same star system will be feasible. At that time, the Empire will be able to try any engineering project that requires a lot of energy, such as the transformation of the planetary environment. Your Majesty, one of our fleets has discovered a large number of corruptor warship wreckages on the outskirts of a star system. These corruptor warship wreckages look very old. Not only that, our scanners cannot scan them. An energy barrier blocks our observation of this star system, including the visual barrier. We can only observe this star system through gravity. If nothing unexpected happens, this star system should be the light of faith fortress left by the previous generation of civilization. Tianyi's voice interrupted Mingze, whose thoughts were flying. Oh? Fleet number 7, Mingze's eyes lit up when he heard the news. Mingze, who had picked up a lot of good things in the starting ring world and was full of oil, now hoped most to find another relic of the previous generation of civilization. Now he couldn't wait to know what good things were in this fortress used by the previous generation of civilization to resist the Zerg. Your Majesty, this star system was discovered by Fleet number 3. Before Tianyi finished speaking, Mingze cut off the connection with his body and came to the hibernation chamber on the flagship of Fleet number 3. Mingze got up from the hibernation chamber, grabbed a towel prepared by the side and wiped his body clean, changed into power armor and entered the bridge. Welcome, Your Majesty. All the officers on the bridge immediately stood up and saluted. Mingze waved his hand and sat on his command seat. How is the situation? Have you found anything? Li Mingze asked after taking a sip of hot tea handed over by an officer. No, Your Majesty. The drones we launched into the star system have lost contact, but the drones we set the return program for have returned intact. This layer of energy membrane only blocks communication, but it will not harm the drones, the temporary commander of this fleet replied. Order the orbital airborne force to immediately organize 2 100-man death squads to enter on transport ships, if it is safe. Return to report the information, Li Mingze waved his hand and ordered. Soon, 2 transport ships loaded with death-defying soldiers left the Imperial fleet and flew toward the star system covered by the wreckage of the Corruptor warship. As the transport ships entered the wreckage of the Corruptor warship, the 2 transport ships disappeared. It was not until more than 10 hours later that the 2 transport ships slowly returned to the Imperial fleet. Your Majesty, it's very safe inside. We didn't encounter any enemies or automatic weapons, the captain of the returning death-defying team reported to Li Mingze. Chapter 343 Entering the Fortress of Light of Faith. Very good, arrange 4 cruisers to follow me in, and the remaining warships stay outside to be on guard. Li Mingze nodded and ordered the crew beside him to control the battleships to fly towards the Corruptor wreckage belt. 4 cruisers quickly flew out of the fleet and followed a flagship to fly into the wreckage belt. As the 5 warships passed through the quietly suspended wreckage of the Corruptor warship, 5 huge buildings with silver light appeared in front of everyone. There are no planets in this strange galaxy. 5 huge crescent-shaped fortresses are slowly rotating around the star in the middle. The blue light emitted by the star is mostly blocked by the energy collectors extending from these 5 fortresses. These giant energy collectors are composed of small equilateral hexagonal collectors, which are densely covered above the star like a honeycomb structure. But I don't know if it's unfinished or what. These energy collectors only cover half of the star. What is puzzling is that on the 5 fortresses that make up the Light of Faith fortress, there are countless drones taking out cans of silver metal tubes from the fortress and stacking them together. There are already a lot of these silver metal cans stored. From Li Mingze's perspective, they are as big as half of the moon. Scan completed, race classification, human, automatic defense system closed, docking guidance system opened, entertainment and living area activated. The interior of the fortress, which was originally pitch black, suddenly lit up with lights. The originally weathered plants in the landscape room quickly recovered their vitality after being swept by green lights, and the streams in the jungle began to flow again. The gray ceiling of the fortress hall also turned into blue sky and white clouds, and the lights gradually changed from fluorescent lights to daylight. One by one, the cleaning robots were activated and began to get busy in the fortress, while Li Mingze and others outside were still unaware. Sir, we received the docking guidance information. This information. It's Chinese. It's our language. The communication officer who received the message was a little surprised. Let's go. Li Mingze pondered for a moment and decided to follow the guidance information. Otherwise, it would be embarrassing if the other party thought he was an invader and eliminated him. Under the guidance of the Light of Faith fortress, the 5 warships slowly drifted towards one of the fortresses. Dozens of crescent-shaped fortresses as big as the Earth slowly blocked Li Mingze's sight, and the blue stars soon disappeared from his sight. The 5 spaceships stopped in front of a closed gate, on which the 4 huge Chinese characters Gate Number 1 were painted. As the gate in front of them trembled slightly, the 2 heavy alloy doors slowly opened to the upper and lower sides, revealing a layer of blue light film. 5 white beams of light shot out from the port behind the gate, slowly pulling the 5 Imperial warships that had stopped moving inside. After entering the port, white beams of light shot from different positions controlled the Imperial warships to pass through countless buildings, and soon arrived at the berth. The outside atmosphere is suitable for human survival. No harmful substances or germs have been detected in the air. The breathing device can be removed, as an electronic sound came from the airlock of the spacecraft. Everyone reached out to touch the helmet. Don't take it off. Li Mingze stretched out his hand to stop everyone. He still remembered how this fortress fell. Who knows if there are still Zerg-infected people lurking in the air. Everyone put down their hands, took out the rifles on their backs and put them on their chests, and followed Li Mingze's footsteps down to the port of this fortress. Welcome to the Light of Faith Transfer Station Navigation System. Please call me Tianyi 83410. A figure suddenly appeared in front of Li Mingze, scaring everyone. Light of Faith Transfer Station? Isn't it the Light of Faith Fortress? Li Mingze asked puzzledly. 40,000 years ago, The Supreme Scientific Committee of Mankind discovered this abandoned space fortress. In line with the idea of waste utilization, the Supreme Scientific Committee renovated and developed this fortress, and used its original energy absorption device to build an energy crystal factory to provide energy crystals for the committee's spacecraft traveling between the stars. At the same time, this transit station also provides rest and entertainment places for travelers wandering in space. These services are free of charge. Only the supply of energy crystals requires currency points. A holographic screen appeared in front of the guiding intelligence. The holographic screen played from the discovery of this abandoned fortress by the exploration team to the transformation of this fortress by the Supreme Committee of Mankind into a civilian transit station. Later, dozens of wormholes were activated and appeared next to the stars. Civilian spaceships flew out of them and docked in the transit station. The rested spaceships flew towards another wormhole again. Then the picture turned into a star map, with countless white lines running through the star map, and the Light of Faith transfer station was emitting green light in the star map, with dozens of white lines connecting other blue light balls around it. These light balls should be the locations of other transfer stations. Finally, the star map disappeared, and dozens of old men in white lab coats stood in 3 rows in the middle of the picture. Just above the picture was a logo of the Supreme Scientific Committee of Humanity, composed of a honeycomb structure. Seeing this, Li Mingze's pupils shrank. This video revealed 2 important messages. One is that this transfer station seems to be directly connected to a star field, marked with a word capital. The second is that this civilization is actually all human. You must know that this is a long-standing civilization that has existed for tens of thousands of years. This also explains why there are so many human civilizations or human-like civilizations in this galaxy. Maybe these civilizations are the remains of this civilization, or they are deliberately created as test products. This fortress must be blown up and cannot be left. Li Mingze gritted his teeth and ordered Tianyi. Why? Monica and Qiuai looked at Li Mingze in confusion after hearing this. You see, this fortress is the transfer station of this civilization, and the wormhole channels in each huge star field lead to this transfer station, and there are thicker connecting channels between each transfer station. In other words, if this transfer station is blown up, then in this large star field, the spacecraft of this civilization will not be able to use the transfer station to go to other star fields. Similarly, no spacecraft can suddenly reach the heart of our star field when we are unprepared. Li Mingze now regards the corruptor's star field as his own star field. But, the technology contained in this transfer station, Qiuai said unwillingly. You know, such an advanced civilization's transfer station must have a lot of good things. Chapter 344 Detonation. Remember, don't be greedy. If we don't blow it up, the fleet of this civilization can open a wormhole one day and appear beside us without warning. We may be wiped out before we react. We can develop technology slowly, but safety is the most important thing, Li Mingze said in a serious tone. Moreover, we are now tourists. Under this authority, we can't obtain important technical information at all. If we dismantle things randomly, the defense weapons of this transit station may be activated. Li Mingze shook his head, a little regretful. But Your Majesty, no one has been to this transit station for a long time. You can see that the energy crystals have exceeded the inventory and are stacked in space. Qiuai pointed to the drone flying outside the window holding the energy crystal tank and said, No, look here, there are no traces of battle, which means that this civilization withdrew on its own, which proves that they did not encounter war or natural disasters. 40,000 years is a bit long for us, but for the planets that have existed in the universe for billions of years, it is just a blink of an eye. How do you know if this civilization has left temporarily for 40,000 years? Li Mingze shook his head. Okay, then how do we blow up this fortress? Qiuai sighed helplessly. Pile these energy crystals to the energy absorption device center of the fortress, and then launch missiles to detonate all the energy crystals. Li Mingze pointed to the floating hologram of the fortress in front of him. Let's go. After Li Mingze and others walked around the fortress twice and found that there was nothing good to use, they turned around and returned to the spaceship helplessly. As the flagship took off, the other 4 cruisers in the fleet that had entered this star system withdrew all drones, leaving only a few drones for detonating bombs. Not long after, the Empire's warships had withdrawn from this star system wrapped in energy barriers and came to the wreckage of the corruptor warship. All warships continue to retreat. Li Mingze frowned and looked at the dark wreckage in front of him. After the Empire's fleet retreated to a safe area, the preset time also arrived, and the drones left in the Light of Faith fortress placed their large nuclear weapons in the energy crystal piles. Although the artificial intelligence of the Light of Faith discovered the threat, it was too late. The huge nuclear explosion detonated the originally stable energy crystal. The power and range of the secondary explosion of the energy crystal far exceeded the explosion of the Empire's nuclear weapons. The spreading energy quickly blew up the center of the energy extraction device of the entire fortress. The liquid energy running in the center instantly lost its stability and began to explode in the energy pipeline of the fortress. With small flames, the last huge flame gushed out from the openings of the fortress. The gravity stabilization device in the Light of Faith transfer station lost its working energy as the explosion and the energy center were blown up. The huge gravity of the star began to pull the 5 fortresses into the star. Although the artificial intelligence of the fortress kept starting the backup energy battery, it consumed too much energy to maintain operation. The energy in the energy battery was consumed in less than a few seconds. Most of the original reactor group was also blown up in the explosion of the energy crystal inside the fortress, and the remaining small part was constantly on strike. The lights on the 5 fortresses began to flicker non-stop, and with explosions of varying sizes, the 5 fortresses began to slowly slide towards the star behind. At this time, Mingze could already observe this spectacular scene through the optical system, because the energy system had completely collapsed, and the energy field that was originally used to cover this star system also disappeared after flickering twice. This star system was once again exposed to the universe and could be observed by people. Looking at the Light of Faith fortress that was being swallowed up by the huge star bit by bit, Mingze shook his head with some regret. This kind of sinking method did not even allow a piece of debris to escape, and all the debris, big or small, had been captured by the star again and fell towards the star. Your Majesty, don't think about it, we will be able to build such a fortress sooner or later. Tianyi controlled her artificial body to come to Mingze's side, stretched out her slender hand and gently massaged Mingze's temple. It's okay. Hey. Order the domestic resources to be tilted towards scientific research. We need to speed up our research. Those captured corrupt scientists, brainwash them, threaten them, give them a certain amount of rewards, and then put them all into the field of civilian research. Adjust our own civilian scientists to the military field. We must maximize the use of resources. Mingze's hands kept tapping on the armrest. Yes, Your Majesty. Tianyi nodded and turned to leave. Mingze continued to watch quietly as the Light of Faith fortress slowly sank into the star. With the eruption of a solar storm, the 5 huge space fortresses completely sank into the star. They would be melted by the high temperature inside the sun near the core of the sun. Raise all shields to the maximum and prepare to resist the solar wind, Mingze shouted to the soldiers in the bridge. In the blink of an eye, huge flame arches rose from the huge stars in the distance, and countless materials were ejected into the universe by the stars. Soon the radiation detectors on the battleships began to flash wildly, and a large amount of electromagnetic radiation and high-energy particle streams passed through the Empire's fleet. Fortunately, the Imperial fleet was protected by the shield and was not seriously injured, which also made Mingze feel relieved. Thousands of light-years away from the Light of Faith transfer station, next to the planet transfer station of the Star Fortress that has been reactivated by the Supreme Science Committee. As soon as the 5 exploration ships opened the wormhole channel, the wormhole channel collapsed inward and disappeared. This confused the captains of the 5 exploration ships. Report to the captain, the terminal at the other end of our wormhole channel, the Light of Faith transfer station unilaterally shut down the power supply of the wormhole channel. A crew member shook his head at the display in front of him. I will report this to the committee. The captain nodded and walked towards the communication room. A few hours later, in a dark room inside the Star Fortress, several middle-aged men in lab coats came into the room. When several people entered the room, a huge galaxy suspended in the air suddenly appeared in the room, and the light emitted by the galaxy illuminated the entire room. In the hologram of the Milky Way, it can be seen that many areas of the huge circle with the Star Fortress as the center have lost their light and become somewhat dim. It seems that during the 38,000 years we were asleep, the transfer station has suffered a lot of losses, a middle-aged man sighed as he enlarged the hologram. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345, Luck. It seems that during the 38,000 years we were asleep, the transit stations have suffered a lot of damage. A middle-aged man slowly enlarged the hologram. Now less than half of the wormhole high-speed network we built in the Milky Way is still intact. Most of the damage to these transit stations was caused by natural disasters, and a small part was blown up by humans. Another tall middle-aged man looked at the dimmed areas in the hologram and said with a headache, "It doesn't matter. When our fleet is ready, we can rebuild a better high-speed network." The oldest man among the three patted the shoulders of the two and comforted them. "Long live mankind, long live mankind." The lights in the room dimmed again, and the figures of the three disappeared into the darkness. The 5 spaceships that were about to go to the Corruptor Star region also received the order to terminate the mission at this time, and turned to fly to another intact transit station. Mingze, who had just blown up the Light of Faith transfer station, didn't know that by chance he had passed by the spaceship of the Supreme Scientific Committee of Humanity. If it was a few days later, the spaceship of the Supreme Scientific Committee would arrive in the starfield. However, after the Light of Faith transfer station was blown up, the Scientific Committee changed its original plan and turned to activate the committee facilities in other directions. When they set their sights on this star field that they didn't know how long it would take to fly to, it might not be a few years later. After the Light of Faith transfer station was blown up, the Imperial fleet continued to advance towards the territory of the Corruptor civilization at a high speed as always. In just 2 months, all the colonies of the Corruptor civilization had been captured by the Empire. Before the last few planets fell, a fleeing fleet of 15 Corruptor cruisers carried the few remaining elites in various fields of their civilization and fled into hyperspace. However, if they knew that the direction they were fleeing was exactly the direction of the Supreme Scientific Committee of Humanity, they might not flee. It might be better to stay as prisoners than to fall into the hands of the Scientific Committee. The Empire quickly solved all the orbital facilities in the space of the Corruptor civilization. The Corruptor colonies that lost all air superiority had no choice but to surrender. In the last 10 days, the Empire's ground forces were useless. The Corruptors who went wherever they went surrendered to the Empire's troops without even resisting. More than 20 million ground combat Corruptors were captured at one time, and the number of Imperial miners increased dramatically. Obviously, the infrastructure on the starless planet was no longer sufficient. Helplessly, the Empire could only stop the mining of minerals and ordered the Corruptors who had already landed on the surface of the planet to use the building materials dropped by the Empire to build homes for the upcoming 20 million miners. The Empire built 5 more orbital space stations on the starless planet. When the 6 space stations work at the same time, countless amethysts will be excavated continuously. However, the special nature of amethyst means that it cannot be transported through the Empire's unique material transmission technology, and can only be transported to the Empire through transport ships. In order to reduce transportation time and improve transportation efficiency, the Empire's first wormhole high-speed channel also began to be built. When the Empire designed and manufactured this wormhole high-speed channel, in order to save energy, it was designed to be able to pass only small transport ships. However, it was sufficient as a high-speed channel for transporting ore and survival supplies. A few days later, there was no independent planet in the entire Corruptor Star region, and all the planets fell into the hands of the Empire. Because these colonies no longer had armed forces, and ordinary Corruptors were basically the same as normal humans, except that they had the existence of devouring genes, so 100,000 military police could control a colony planet very well. There were more than 50 residential colonies and more than 180 industrial and mineral planets in the territory of the Corruptor civilization. The number of military police required for the mineral planets would be even less. In total, the Empire could control the situation very well with less than 7 million military police. And this number of 7 million was a drop in the bucket for the Empire's population of 100 billion. Transport ships began to transport the Empire's military police to these colonies. A series of constructions began on these planets. The original Corruptors could occupy thousands of square meters of houses alone, and the utilization rate of houses was extremely low. In order to integrate resources and facilitate management, the Empire divided areas for Corruptor civilians, and the buildings in the areas were also converted into living spaces of about 100 square meters. A large number of corruptor civilians moved out of their homes under the supervision of the Imperial Military Police and moved into these areas specially prepared for them. Because the corruptors' buildings did not conform to the aesthetics and living habits of the Sith people, a large number of corruptors' buildings were overturned and rebuilt, and the natural environment was also transformed in a direction suitable for the Imperials to live in order to attract more Imperials to come and colonize. In the newly occupied star regions of the Empire will begin to use biological spacecraft that have been readjusted by the Empire and whose appearance is more in line with the aesthetics of the Sith people. At the same time, various mechanical equipment and biological cultivation equipment of the corruptor civilization have been put into production and use again. The large amount of manufacturing power saved will be invested in the construction of combat fleets. The original corruptor citizens were all demoted to slaves, and their descendants in the future will also be slaves. Only after they engage in scientific research and make contributions can they apply to the Empire to remove the devouring gene in their bodies and transform themselves into third-class citizens of the Empire. Only after making major contributions and removing the devouring gene can they become ordinary citizens of the Empire. At the same time, up to 10 million corruptors who surrendered early and were willing to fight for the Empire were incorporated into the auxiliary army. If they performed well, they could be promoted to the orbital airborne army. The captured corruptor battleship pilots have all been genetically modified and become new transport ship pilots, responsible for the transportation of materials within the star domain of the corruptor civilization. A large number of precious minerals and general minerals looted from the corruptor civilization were transported to the refining ship that had just arrived. These minerals will be broken into quarks and transmitted back to the Empire for reorganization. Since this battle, although the Empire's fleet has lost more than half, the Empire's territory has expanded more than 10 times. The existing resources seized from the corruptor civilization are enough to support the Empire to rebuild an expeditionary fleet. Not only that, the Empire also obtained a large amount of biotechnology from the Academy of Sciences of the corruptor civilization. After a few years of digestion and absorption, the Empire will be able to increase the average life expectancy of the Sith by another 100 years. Chapter 346 50 years. At the same time, the new energy-absorbing organization structure in the corruptor laboratory also provided ideas for the upgrade of the Empire's energy-absorbing organization. The addition of a large number of corruptor scientists has made the Empire's scientific research talents abundant again. Some originally unimportant scientific research projects have also been launched to expand the Empire's technology tree. Mingze has a hunch that his civilization has reached a bottleneck. Only when the technology in all aspects is comprehensively improved can the technology of his civilization enter a new realm. In addition, due to the large-scale development of the amethyst mine, the Empire's new energy weapons can be equipped, and the Empire's fleet can also begin large-scale maintenance and upgrades. After the Empire solved the major threats around it, no one could disturb the Empire's peace of mind. Another 3 months passed, and the Empire has entered a stable development track. A large number of Sith people have colonized the corruptor star field, and the corruptor star field has truly returned to the control of the Empire. Countless mines have also begun to be built in the original corruptor star field. Now the Upper Star District and space stations belonging to the Empire have begun to operate over the colonized stars. The entire star field has returned to prosperity, the war alert has been lifted in the starting point ring world, and the entire Empire has resumed normal development. 50 years have passed like a stream. Located in the star system of the original capital of the corruptor, a silver diamond-shaped space station floating in the asteroid belt produced by the explosion of the capital star has lit up. This huge space station with a diameter of 10 kilometers is the last node of the Sith Empire's wormhole high-speed network. With the completion of the construction of this node, it means that the starting point star system and the upper star area have been connected by the wormhole high-speed channel. The original 4 months required to reach the farthest colony star in the upper star area from the starting point star system have been shortened to just 12 days. In order to provide energy for the wormhole stabilizers spread across all the Empire's colonies, each star system with a wormhole stabilizer has built a super large-scale solar power station next to the star. The volume of each solar power station has reached the area of the space city in the orbit of the Sixth star. Although the main part of this solar power station is a thin layer of solar panels, the cost of construction is still very high. The cost of each solar power station has reached the cost of 3 battleships. It is precisely because the cost of each wormhole stabilizer is very high that the Empire also adopted the model of the wormhole channel of the Supreme Scientific Committee of Humanity. First, starting from the Empire's new starting point star and ending at the Corruptor's original capital star, a transfer station was built every 30 light years. The Empire built a total of 5 transfer stations. Each transfer station is like a tree, extending to the nearest colonized star system around it. From the star map, it looks like a long branch, and each node extends outward with thinner branches. However, since the star field of the Empire is now in a long strip, only one line of transfer stations is needed to cover the entire territory of the Empire. In this way, as the star field of the Empire expands, only one more transfer station needs to be extended outward, and finally a huge grid composed of transfer stations is formed. When the resources of the Empire are more abundant, 4 wormholes will be built between the 8 vertices of each cube to save flight time. Although the Empire has adopted this economical model, its huge construction scale still took the Empire a full 50 years to complete. With the commissioning of this transfer station, 12 huge metal rings were placed in different positions of this space station. Waves of gray energy mist continuously sprayed from the diamond-shaped space station to the 12 rings. After a few hours, the diamond-shaped space station stopped spraying, and wormholes composed of gray energy mist appeared in the 12 rings. The wormhole entrance and exit have been activated. The spacecraft of the number 4 transfer station has entered the wormhole. The estimated arrival time is 3 days. As the voice of the intelligent brain sounded in the control room of the space station, the staff breathed a sigh of relief and cheered loudly. The safe operation of the wormhole network means that the transportation time of various materials that cannot be transported through material transmission in the Empire will be greatly shortened, and the connection between various colonies will be greatly strengthened. The Empire's economy will usher in a new round of takeoff. The well-connected wormhole network also means that the Empire's fleet can be assembled faster, which is extremely important in interstellar wars. No matter which direction there is an invading enemy, the fleet of the entire Empire can reach the front within 12 days. The Empire's war potential has been greatly enhanced again, and Mingze's rule over his various colonies has become more stable. The glory of His Majesty, the Emperor, will be spread to the various colonies of the Empire through the wormhole channel. Of course, the development of the Empire in the past 50 years is not limited to the wormhole high-speed channel. In the past 50 years, the Empire has developed mineral planets within 30 light-years around the starting star system. As for the colonized stars, the utilization area of the starting ring star system has not reached 5%, and there is still a lot of vacant land for the Empire to use. Only when the land of the ring world and the land of the original corruptor colony in the upper star area are fully utilized, the Empire will continue to colonize outward. In the 50 years without war, the population of the Empire has risen like a blowout, reaching as many as 200 billion. The current situation of the Empire is that the production machinery cannot keep up with the speed of population development, and a large amount of manpower is wasted. It is precisely because of this that the human manufacturing facilities on Nuwa Star, which had been repaired, have been shelved indefinitely. When the existing equipment and materials of the Empire can completely meet the existing population of 200 billion, new humans will be created. During this period, people will rely entirely on natural pregnancy and production. After the vigorous propaganda of the Empire's official, more than 50 billion Sith people immigrated to the colonies in the upper star area in 50 years. Countless minerals and precious resources were continuously transported back to the starting point ring world through the wormholes created in advance. In addition to the mines built in the ring world and the surrounding mining planets in the past 50 years, the resources owned by the Empire have never been so abundant. On the oceans of the ring world, shipyards capable of building battleships have sprung up one after another. In the past 50 years, there have been 10,000 newly built shipyards. If they were started at the same time, the Empire could build 10,000 newly upgraded battleships in 2 years. However, since the Empire's battleships are still in the upgrade and transformation period, the Empire has not built too many battleships, lest the technology of the new battleships is outdated after they are built, so it only doubled the size of the original fleet and stopped building. 3 experimental dreadnoughts designed and built by the Empire have been built, and all the materials are taken from the abandoned areas of the ring world. The hull data of the Empire's newly built dreadnoughts is exactly the same as that of the Michigan. Chapter 347 Artificial Magician. The hull data of the Empire's newly built dreadnought is exactly the same as that of the Michigan. The only difference is that it does not have such advanced reactor technology as the previous generation of civilization. Even if the reactor is upgraded, the reactor of the dreadnought built by the Empire itself still occupies half of the space in the dreadnought warehouse. Only such a large number of reactors can support the mass accelerator and thruster on the huge volume of the dreadnought. The purple beam weapon that the Empire has just developed is also a big energy consumer. The energy consumption of these weapons makes it impossible to install gravity cannons on the new dreadnought, even if the reactor is installed. The Empire had to change its strategy and replace the main gun of the Crescent with a gravity cannon. The gravity cannon became the exclusive weapon of the two previous generation civilization ships owned by the Empire, the Crescent and the Michigan. Unlike the slow progress of the expansion of the Empire's fleet, the Empire's biotechnology development can be said to be soaring because it has absorbed the technology tree of the Corruptor civilization and the joint efforts of a large number of captured Corruptor scientists. It was originally expected that the lifespan of the Imperial people could only be increased by 100 years, but with the help of the scientists of the Corruptors, it was unexpectedly increased to 200 years. Combined with the various life extension technologies of the Empire, the lifespan of the Imperial people can now reach an astonishing 500 years. In addition to lifespan, some biotechnologies that can facilitate war and colonization have also been developed. There are as many as dozens of biotechnologies that can be used in ground warfare. For example, an energy-absorbing tissue shield wall that can grow at a high speed using the nutrient solution carrot. The initial state of this shield wall is just a capsule half the size of a grenade. As long as it is thrown to the ground with force, the capsule will break, and the biological seeds inside will begin to absorb the nutrient solution in the capsule and grow wildly, and finally grow into an energy-absorbing shelter of 1.5 meters high and 3 meters wide, providing cover for the soldiers. Another example is the vines that can drill into the ground by themselves after being thrown to the ground, and break out of the ground when the enemy passes by, and completely bind the enemy. Another example is a weakened alien that is only the size of a teacup and can grow into a mature body within 1 minute when thrown on the ground. This alien has a lifespan of only half an hour due to limited energy. When its lifespan is about to run out, it can also self-destruct and spray acid to kill the enemy. It can be said that the use of various biotechnologies has greatly improved the ground combat effectiveness of the Imperial forces. Biotechnologies are not only used in ground combat, but also in space combat. The new disposable biological drone is the product of biotechnologies. Taking advantage of the high growth rate of organisms, only a body slightly larger than a teacup is needed. After injecting nutrient solution, it can quickly grow into the size of a drone, and then add a thruster module and a control module to it. This drone can carry bombs to perform suicide attacks. This fast manufacturing method can make a drone from scratch and send it to the battlefield in just 1 minute. Such a speed is undoubtedly a plug-in in combat, eliminating the large amount of time required for printing and manufacturing. The Empire's drone mothership can create a suicide drone swarm that is 5 times the size of the mothership in just half an hour. In addition, there are also biological filling devices used to quickly fill the holes in the wounded parts, etc. On the third day after the completion of the last wormhole channel node of the Empire, transport ships loaded with various experimental equipment flew out of the wormhole and arrived at a transfer station of the original Corruptor's capital star system. Your Majesty, we need to pass through the wormhole channel again to reach the primitive civilization planet used for experiments. Tianyi, wearing a cheongsam, stood beside Li Mingze's bed and whispered to Li Mingze. Tianyu's originally childish face has become mature and charming. I know, call me when we reach the destination. Li Mingze turned over and continued to sleep. The transport ship that had just left the wormhole turned around again and flew towards the metal ring in another direction, disappearing into the gray wormhole. In the 213th year of the Anuka calendar, 5 fireballs fell from the sky, and the 5 messengers sent by the Creator God, representing life, death, light, thunder and weather, came to our world. These gods can use the power given to them by the God of creation. The God of life can control the power of life, raise vine walls on the earth, trap wild beasts with giant vines, and summon beasts from the divine world. The God of death can control metal and gravity, and can use the ubiquitous metal to cut the enemy into pieces, and can even control gravity to make the enemy unable to move. The god of light can control the light of divine punishment that falls from the sky and wipe out those who go against his will from the ground. The god of thunder can release thunder and lightning with both hands, and can even summon thunder and lightning from the sky to split his enemies into ashes. The god of weather can control the weather, causing hail to fall from the originally clear sky and waves to rise from the calm sea. The gods told us that if we believe in their gods, we can have the power given by God after being baptized by the holy water. In the dark castle, a pale old man trembled and wrote down what he saw and heard on a piece of parchment. After finishing writing, the old man took out a pendant with Mingze's portrait from his pocket, held it tightly with both hands and closed his eyes. The purpose of our experiment this time is to test our ground combat system. If this experiment is successful, the combat effectiveness of our empire's ground forces will be further improved. This experiment will use the natives of this planet as experimental subjects to test our orbital weapons summoning system, meteorological weapons system, electromagnetic weapons system, and the biological weapons that have just been developed. While conducting weapon tests, we can also test the image of religion on the natives, and whether this religious brainwashing has any effect on our brainwashing. In the orbital transport ship of this planet where the messenger of God descended, hundreds of scientists were sitting in the conference room listening to Mingze's speech on the podium. Your Majesty, how long will this plan last? A scientist raised his hand and asked carefully. This experiment will last for 2 years. We have to find out and solve the various shortcomings of these new weapons within these 2 years, and propose improvement plans. Mingze patted the table. Okay, the mission has been told to you. You can start working. Mingze clapped his hands and walked down the podium. The scientists sitting in the conference room lined up in an orderly manner and left. At this time, there were already hundreds of satellites of various sizes floating on a planet called Experiment 001. These satellites were the source of power for the god envoys on the ground. In addition to the life envoys responsible for testing biological weapons, the power of other god envoys came from the orbital attack satellites in orbit and the 12 huge weather control columns that had been inserted in various places on the planet. Chapter 348 Battleship Motion. In order to ensure that ground forces can fight smoothly even without warships to provide orbital attack cover in future planetary ground battles, and to increase the offensive capabilities of ground combat units, the Empire has specially developed this unmanned orbital auxiliary attack system. The beam attack of the God of Light is very simple, that is, an orbital attack satellite equipped with a beam cannon in orbit. The God of Death is a special satellite that can cooperate with a chip on the God of Death to control the electromagnetic force and gravity in a local area. The God of Thunder and the God of Death use the same support system, but the magnetic field controls the metal and releases electrical energy. The God of Weather uses a huge weather column that is directly dropped from orbit and inserted into the ground. This weather column can change the weather in some areas on the surface of this planet, and its technology comes from the planet transformation technology that the Empire is developing. This weather tower can create extreme weather such as hail, heavy rain, tornadoes, etc. within a certain range. Once these weapon systems are successfully tested and put into use, the Empire will not have to waste precious warship resources on supporting ground forces in future wars. In the future, the fleet can completely abandon the satellites and continue to advance after destroying the opponent's orbital units. The landing troops will seize control of the planet with the assistance of these orbital satellites. Unlike the quietness in the experimental ship in the orbit of Experiment 001, the Empire's largest shipyard in the orbit of Niwa is bustling with people. Politicians from various colonies of the Empire have gathered here, and the top military officials of the Empire are also present. They will witness the launch of the Empire's first mass-produced dreadnought. This mass-produced dreadnought is different from the 3 experimental ships that the Empire has built. The 3 experimental ships all use metal materials cut from the ring world by maintenance drones. Although this metal material has very high hardness, strength and other performance, the speed of obtaining materials greatly restricts the construction speed of the dreadnought. In order to speed up the construction of the dreadnought, Mingze ordered the Academy of Sciences to step up research on new materials that can be used as substitutes. With the day and night efforts of all scientists in the Academy of Sciences, a breakthrough was finally made. Scientists have discovered that by adding a small amount of ring-world metal to an existing metal in the Empire, the resulting alloy has almost half the strength of ring-world metal. The dreadnoughts built with this alloy are extremely cost-effective. Most importantly, The Empire can produce this alloy in large quantities, which basically solves the material problem that restricts the mass production of dreadnoughts. Moreover, the Empire can use the advantage of quantity to make up for the shortcomings in quality. The shape of this mass-produced dreadnought is still the appearance of the Michigan, but its volume is 1/5 smaller, and the construction cost is only about 1/4 of the experimental ship. The reason for reducing the volume is that scientists have discovered that if the Empire's existing reactor technology is used to propel such a huge warship, the number of reactors required will reach a terrifying number. By reducing the volume by 1/5, removing the mass projector equipped on the experimental ship, the original Crescent's superweapon, and replacing it with a lighter new purple beam weapon as the battleship's superweapon, the number of reactors required for the dreadnought will be greatly reduced. The Empire used the saved space to strengthen the number of main guns and armor of the battleship. The original large storage space of the dreadnought was also cut by more than half, and the remaining small part was transformed into a storage warehouse for installing a swarm of maintenance drones. The new maintenance drones are not the product of the previous generation of civilization, but battlefield maintenance drones designed by the Empire itself. These maintenance drones can cover the entire fleet, and each drone carries a small material transmission device that can continuously print out materials from maintenance. These drones allow the Imperial fleet to repair damaged hulls at any time during combat. Not only that, in special circumstances, these drones can also synthesize fusion weapons in their bodies to become suicide drones. In addition to the improvements in super weapons and storage space, the mass-produced dreadnought also replaced half of the mass acceleration cannons with the newly developed purple beam weapons of the Empire. In addition, the mass-produced dreadnought is also equipped with a new type of honeycomb missile. It can be said that the mass-produced dreadnought, armed to the teeth, has greatly improved the combat effectiveness of the Empire. Your Majesty is here, with a message. The guards at the gate of the banquet hall slowly opened the gate to both sides. Long live His Majesty! The originally noisy banquet hall of the shipyard immediately became quiet, and everyone stood at attention and saluted in the direction of the gate. Mingze entered the hall under the escort of the royal guards. Looking around at the excited people in the hall, Mingze reached out and took a glass of wine from the tray in the hands of a maid beside him. Today is a day worth celebrating. There is no need to be so restrained. Enjoy it. Mingze raised his glass and gestured to drink it. Everyone in the hall also hurriedly raised their glasses and drank them all. The hall was back to a lively atmosphere. Mingze nodded with satisfaction and walked to the French window. The banquet hall of this shipyard is located above the 5 docks of this shipyard. Looking out of the window, you can see most of the 5 docks and their exits. Your Majesty, it's time to start, Tianyi reminded Mingze softly in his ear. Mingze nodded, turned around and raised the glass in his hand to the middle of the hall. Everyone, listen to me. I want to take this opportunity to announce an important matter. Mingze picked up a spoon and tapped the wine glass in his hand. Everyone in the hall stopped whispering and looked in the direction of Mingze. In view of the fact that our Empire's technology is becoming more and more advanced, the warships that can be manufactured are getting larger and larger. The original warship units are no longer suitable for the existing Imperial fleet. From today on, the original dreadnoughts are downgraded to battleships. Battleships are downgraded to cruisers, cruisers are downgraded to destroyers, and destroyers are downgraded to frigates. And the original frigates, which are now gunboats, are all allocated to ground forces and no longer belong to the Imperial Air Force. The size of the spacecraft remains unchanged, but the level of naming has been downgraded. Now I announce that the Empire's new battleships are officially put into use, Mingze shouted. After that, the 5 huge dock doors slowly opened, and 5 battleships that were not much different in size from the Michigan slowly sailed out of the dock. The lights on the battleships were all lit up, and the huge cannons on the ships were neatly aimed at the upper right. Long live His Majesty! Long live the Empire! The officers and politicians in the hall shouted excitedly. Chapter 349 No Self-Awareness. 5 brand new battleships gathered in a herringbone formation and slowly sailed past a banquet hall where Mingze and senior officers were. At the same time, they fired a volley in the opposite direction of the banquet hall. Purple rays of light shone into the distant starry sky, and then fireworks were shot into the sky from the orbital guns. In the distance, an extremely large fleet also sailed from the orbital space of New Star and joined the 5 battleships that had just left the shipyard. The combined fleet turned around and passed in front of the banquet hall, where Mingze was again. Everyone, our Empire has ushered in a new era. Li Mingze raised his full wine glass and said loudly. For the Empire. Li Mingze drank it all in one gulp. For your Majesty. For the Empire. Everyone raised their glasses again. A day later, a construction task of up to 1,000 battleships, former mass-produced dreadnoughts, was issued to major shipyards in the Empire. 1,000 large shipyards capable of building large battleships such as new battleships started work immediately, and the keels of battleships began to be printed one by one. Your Majesty, it turns out that the leaders of the human civilizations that were kept captive by the corruptors collectively requested to see you. Tianyi came to the table of Li Mingze, who was browsing documents, and whispered. Oh, if you hadn't said it, I would have almost forgotten about these poor guys. Li Mingze patted his head, and then he remembered that the corruptor civilization he defeated kept a bunch of meat animal civilizations. Tell them to wait in the reception room, I'll be there soon. Li Mingze waved his hand, and Tianyi turned around and left. Half an hour later, Li Mingze, who had washed up again, came to the reception room. However, the noisy discussions coming from the reception room made him frown. These guests really didn't know what to do. Ahem, Li Mingze pretended to cough twice, and the guards on both sides of the door slowly pushed open the door. The leaders of many civilizations all turned their eyes to the direction where Li Mingze was. When they saw that it was a young man in his 20s, they showed some disbelief in their eyes. They didn't know that the Sith Empire, which had not been enslaved by other civilizations, had already developed technology to prolong life. In the eyes of these people, the lifespan of human beings is still the well-known 100 years. After seeing that the leader of this powerful Sith civilization is actually a young man, many leaders couldn't help but look down on him. Why don't you stay in your own territory and come to me? Li Mingze's implication is that you don't hide well and reduce your presence. What's the point of running to the hunter for no reason? However, the people who don't understand the nature of the empire didn't hear the implication of Li Mingze. Respected Emperor of the Sith Empire, we are here to discuss the distribution of spoils. Since the corruptor civilization has been defeated, can its colonies be divided among us? We can develop together, we don't want much, 3 planets for each civilization will be enough. A middle-aged man stood up and said. Li Mingze sneered. It seems that this person is the temporary representative selected by these people. Li Mingze didn't speak, but looked around at the more than 20 people present with some amusement. Also, our civilization has been blocked by the corruptors for too long. Can you give us some of the technology of the corruptors? We need to upgrade the technology of our own civilization. In addition, we also need some supplies to rebuild our civilization. Can you be kind enough to provide us with some supplies? Seeing that Li Mingze didn't say anything, the middle-aged man continued to ask boldly, and everyone nodded in agreement. It seemed that they had already discussed this. Ha ha ha, Li Mingze held his stomach and laughed. After a few breaths, he stopped laughing and swept his cold eyes over everyone present. We, the Sith Empire, are not good people. The reason we want to defeat the corruptors is not to save you. I have forgotten about you all this time and let you jump around for 50 years. Do you think we are a sucker? Do you think we are a little kind and look like we are easy to bully? Li Mingze sneered twice. The reason you have been able to jump around for so long is because I don't take you seriously at all. I wanted to wait until the Empire is stable before I go talk to you one by one. Now it seems that the plan can be advanced. Li Mingze turned around with cold eyes and walked out of the reception room. What do you mean? Everyone in the hall panicked when they heard Li Mingze say this. Kill them all. Li Mingze walked outside the door of the reception room and waved his hand, calling the guards on both sides of the door, and gave a direct order. Yes, sir. The 6 soldiers standing on both sides saluted and opened the safety of their rifles, holding their guns and walking into the reception room side by side. After a while, dozens of crisp gunshots came from behind Li Mingze. Li Mingze shook his head gently and walked towards his office. Your Majesty, how should these civilizations be dealt with? Tianyi had just seen the whole process in the observation room on the side of the reception room. After many civilization leaders were shot, she hurried behind Li Mingze in small steps. These civilizations, let me think. Li Mingze stopped and closed his eyes. Catch all the rebels of these civilizations and send them to the biochemical laboratory. They need a lot of experimental subjects. I'm worried that the crime rate is too low recently and I can't find any experimental subjects. As for the rest of the people, all of them will be subjected to high-intensity brainwashing. After the brainwashing is completed, they will be demoted to slaves. The high-ranking citizens of the empire can adopt their favorite slaves with their contribution points to the empire. By the way, It is forbidden for the citizens of the Empire to have sexual relations with these slaves. It should be made clear when they are received. Those who violate it will be sent to the starless star to mine for life. Of course, for female slaves, if the owner who adopts her has true feelings for her and the slave is willing, then they can apply to be exempted from slave status, granted second-class citizenship and genetic optimization, and allowed to marry. The children born will still be first-class citizens of the Empire. Mingze showed an evil smile at the corner of his mouth. With such a large population base in the Empire, most of the female slaves taken away by the elites of the Empire will soon marry and have children with the people of the Empire. Because those male slaves can only have children with female slaves, and the number of female slaves who can marry them is seriously insufficient, the number of people in these civilizations will soon drop sharply. Hundreds of years later, there will be no more civilized people. The only ones left are the imperial people and the slaves who serve the imperial people. Mingze couldn't help but laugh out loud at his wonderful idea. Your Majesty, this method is amazing. Qiu gave a thumbs up. After following Mingze for so many years, any kindness had long been replaced by loyalty. What Mingze did was absolutely right, no matter good or bad. Chapter 350 Slaves. Because they got rid of the rule of the corrupt, these meat-animal civilizations gradually got on the right track after 50 years of development. People's hatred for the corrupt was slowly forgotten as time went by. Correspondingly, gratitude to the Sith Empire gradually disappeared as time went by, and people only knew to immerse themselves in a rich and comfortable life. At the same time, greed began to expand, so in the end, the leaders of various civilizations united to go to the Empire. Just when they were expecting their leaders to get more benefits from the Empire and were full of fantasies about the future, warships landed in the orbit of their planets, and these people who were still immersed in joy realized that something was wrong. When they saw the shooting stars passing through the sky, it was too late. Countless auxiliary troops and orbital airborne troops came to these defenseless planets. Anna, an ordinary girl among these civilizations. Although she is not very beautiful, she is also above average in the aesthetic standards of the imperial people. Since the corruptors were defeated by the Sith Empire, Anna's parents were released and returned home. Her parents were 50 years old when they had a child, little Anna. Anna, who had grown into a big girl, was playing the piano in her room that day. As a representative of the school's art department, she would perform a piano piece at the grade party the day after tomorrow. Anna, come with us to the air raid shelter. Suddenly, the panicked voices of Anna's parents came from outside her door. Anna stopped playing in confusion, got up and opened the door. What's wrong? Did the corruptor civilization surrender? Anna looked at her panicked parents in a daze, not knowing what they were afraid of. Hurry up, the warships of the Sith Empire have entered the orbit of our planet. We don't know what they are going to do, but our leader has lost contact with us. I'm afraid it's not going to be a good thing. Anna's parents repeated the content of the news broadcast on TV. At this moment, bursts of shrill air raid sirens were heard from the street outside the window. Anna's parents grabbed Anna's hand and ran to the door. Anna, who was held by her parents, couldn't help but look back out the window. The thousands of meteors that kept flashing in the sky outside the window were so dazzling. Bang, 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 dozens of heavy objects fell to the ground from near Anna's house, and the sound of objects falling in the distance was covered by the sirens. But as the heavy objects continued to fall, the floor of Anna's house began to tremble slightly, and the water in the cup on the table was also splashed. What's going on? Did the Sith Empire launch an air raid on us? Anna's father said to himself in panic. Bang! The door of Anna's house was suddenly kicked away, and several black figures gradually walked out of the flying dust. There are 3 people here, one of whom meets the criteria for receiving slaves. The leading black figure suddenly turned around and shouted to the people behind him. Although I don't know what these black figures want to do, judging from the word slaves in their mouths, they are definitely not good people. Power armor comes with a translator. Anna's father pulled out a pistol from behind in panic and pulled the trigger frantically at the black figure. The ancient gunpowder drove the metal bullet to shoot at the black figure. After a few blue lights flashed in front of the black figure, the deformed bullet fell to the ground. If you encounter rebels, take away all rebels carrying weapons, and the wife of another rebel will automatically be eligible to be taken. After that, several black shadows walked out of the dust. They were the orbital airborne troops wearing full body armor. After finding that the bullets were useless, Anna's father dragged Anna into the room, but it was too late. The Imperial airborne soldiers who entered the room pointed their rifles at Anna and the other two and pulled the trigger. After a flash of electric arcs, Anna and her parents were electrocuted to the floor. "Handcuff them and take them away." An officer with a military rank engraved on his shoulder waved his hand, and several airborne soldiers came forward and handcuffed the bracelets on the hands of the 3 people who fell to the ground. Then they dragged them out of the room. "Please, let me go," Anna begged in a low voice. "Don't worry, a new life is waiting for you." After a soldier said this, he knocked Anna unconscious with a rifle butt. After an unknown amount of time, Anna woke up in a daze. When she opened her eyes, she was tied to an operating table. "Let me go. Let me go." Anna, tied up by 5 metal buckles, twisted restlessly on the operating table. "Start brainwashing and inject a security chip into her brain." At the same time, a staff member in a white surgical gown walked by Anna, his hand sliding on the tablet. Then, dozens of blue data cables stretched down from the operating table and slowly attached to Anna's head. Anna's eyes went dark and she lost consciousness again. When she woke up again, she could no longer hate the Empire in her heart, and her bad memories of the Empire had disappeared. When it came to the Sith Empire and His Majesty Mingze, Anna's mind was left with endless admiration. "Start the test. Please tell me your first reaction to the following words." Anna suddenly heard a soft mechanical female voice in her ears. "Apple, I want to eat," Anna answered truthfully. "Family, what is family?" Anna was a little puzzled. "Sith Empire loyalty," Anna's expression was a little serious. "Your Majesty, worship and loyalty," Anna answered again. "Enemy of the Empire should be eliminated and purified," Anna's expression became a little cold. "Master obey," Anna's expression began to ease. "Test passed, unbind." As the electronic female voice disappeared, the metal ring that bound Anna was retracted into the operating table. Very good, Mingze, who was watching the test in the observation room nearby, clapped his hands with satisfaction. With the help of the brainwave scanning device, any answer that goes against the heart will be discovered. From the test results just now, this little girl named Anna did not lie. The brainwashing of the Empire was very successful. While retaining some of her memories, she was successfully instilled with the idea of loyalty to the Empire. Only in this way can those meritorious officials who have made contributions to the Empire but are still single be taken home with confidence. Of course, the Empire strictly prohibits these masters from forcing slaves to have relations. If you want to have relations, you can apply to be released from slavery and then get married. This can also be regarded as a little protection for these slaves by Mingze. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.